You know what it's like.
Yeah, I do. But the farm is too crowded as is. I'm sorry. You'll have to keep looking.
Keep looking. Where do you suggest we do that?
I don't know. I hear Nebraska's nice.
That's how we start the video. This is how you're gonna start the video. You're gonna go, oi! You know what's funny is when I put out the original Walking Dead video and I knew that I was gonna do the spin-offs, I started writing this video and I very naively started it with a few months back I did a video about the Walking Dead, and it's been 2 years. Not literally two. It's like more like a year and a half. It's been a while is my point. It's been a while, 'cause I am stained. And I am also gay. It's been a while, 'cause I sucked a man's ass. Hey, paisanos, it's your boy, MattCMG, and we're back with another big one for you. A big ol' hefty one for you. A BBW of a video. A BBV, if you will. Consider that. Today, we'll be continuing our journey through the Walking Dead universe by looking at the second ever spin-off, The Walking Dead World Beyond, which is right behind me. I even got it on there twice. But you can't really see it because my new chair is big. I don't think I've done a video with this chair yet, so, you know, it is what it is, right? Now, unlike The Walking Dead proper, where I can just kind of flow into it like that, I can get into the real details because I've seen it so many times, and unlike Fear, where I watched it once and just so happened to remember all of the major events, I legitimately remember very little about World Beyond. Now, I watched these episodes as they came out, and I remember the big key moments and stuff like that, but I cannot remember if I liked it or not. Meaning that the rewatch that I did for this video was almost completely blind. That being said, I keep an eye on the forums, on the Reddits, and shit like that, right? You know, so I know that World Beyond is a pretty contentious show. Some people like it, but other people really hate it. Even hardcore Walking Dead fans hate it. So it's honestly really hard to find people going to bat for it. And today, we'll be finding out why. Well, just like we did with the other shows, we're going to be giving this one a fair shake, which is a little easier in this case since I have no biases with this one. But first up, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's calm down, let's slow down. What even is World Beyond? So to understand World Beyond and why many fans found it to be so disappointing, we first need to look at its creation. The series was developed and created by Scott M. Gimple, former showrunner of the main Walking Dead and chief content officer of the Walking Dead universe. And alongside him as co-creator was Matt Negrett, who wrote many episodes of the main show as far back as season 4, many of which were alongside Gimple. Now, if you've ever actually paid attention to who writes which episodes, you could kind of tell what World Beyond was going to be before it even came out. The episodes of the main show written by Matt Negrett were one of two things. Either they were quieter episodes that focused on one or two characters, or they were big premieres and finales where big important stuff happens, where he was usually paired up with another writer, often Gimple himself. World Beyond falls under one of those two categories, but before you take a guess at which one, a little bit more context. Back in April of 2018, filming began for Season 9 of The Walking Dead. As you probably know, this was the season where Andrew Lincoln left the show, forcing the writers to write off the main character, Rick Grimes.
Rick Grimes?
This came with the promise of a trilogy of movies to tie up his character. But for now, the world was waiting for the return of Ricky Dicky Doodah Grimes. The departure of Andrew Lincoln was announced in May of 2018, with World Beyond being indirectly announced in July under the title Monument. Now, I don't know anything for sure, but it's my theory that Gimple developed World Beyond during this period because he had a plan for The Walking Dead that would require a lot of time and setup. Or, in other words, he really wanted to get to the Rick movies, but he couldn't do them yet, so he had to, he had to do something. So he decided, hey, let's do build-up. A year later, and the show was greenlit, and it was officially revealed at the end of 2019 as a 2-season limited series before premiering on October 1st, 2020 as The Walking Dead World Beyond. The purpose of World Beyond was seemingly to set up the Rick Grimes movies that they had planned by giving us more context on the group who took Rick, the CRM. They were trying to expand the Walking Dead universe, and with the departure of Andrew Lincoln, this turned out to be a perfect opportunity to do so. But taking us back to those two categories that I mentioned earlier, Which one do you think World Beyond falls under? Yup, it's the quiet, character-focused one. What, that doesn't make sense? What are you fucking stupid? What are you dumb, stupid, dumb, and gay and dumb? To an IMDb fiend like me, it wasn't looking good that a Walking Dead show was being advertised as a big step for the universe, but was being handled by writers who don't do that type of shit. When you take into account that much of the writing team for this show was made up of people who have zero experience with The Walking Dead, it does not instill confidence. The show had writers from shows like 13 Reasons Why, Pretty Little Liars, a bunch of CW Arrowverse shows, all of which are hated for being cringy. And even the main creator himself, Matt Negrete, is credited as a co-creator for American Dragon Jake Long and wrote episodes for a bunch of other Disney cartoons, like Fillmore, created by Scott M. Gimple. Ooh, it all comes together. I think it's really funny that like all the Fear the Walking Dead conspiracies are like, oh, Chambliss and Goldberg were friends with Scott Gimple, that's why they got the job. When there's like no evidence of that. But then when you look at World Beyond and there's a bunch of like Disney cartoon writers that likely knew Gimple from when they were working on Fillmore. If any show has the nepotism writers, it's World Beyond, not Fear. But you know, anyways, let's continue. On top of that, I think that World Beyond was timed horribly. We were coming right off of the main show losing its most compelling character and were promised to see him again. So when their next project has nothing to do with that, of course people were gonna be angry. The trailer certainly wasn't doing it any favors either, with it having a very CW vibe that fans of The Walking Dead, a universe founded on gritty realism, did not vibe with. Like, dude, these comments are fucking brutal, man. Like, they're so fucking brutal. Like, it's literally, who cares? Where's Rick? No, unlike Fear that had a promising concept and came out right at Walking Dead's peak popularity, World Beyond came out at a time where Walking Dead fatigue was really setting in and was possibly the darkest time for the franchise. Right out the gate, this show was not well received, and people weren't even willing to give it a chance. Now, that all being said, a spin-off being tonally different from its parent show and coming out at a very bad time where fans have completely different expectations does not inherently make a show bad. Like I said, we're going to be giving World Beyond a fair shake in this video, because while the context of its existence is a little bit strange, that does not necessarily translate directly to quality. So, ladies and gentlemen, I am MattCMG, and join me as we return to the Walking Dead universe and enter a World Beyond. See what I did there? Oh, look what I did there. Oh, see what I done diddled there? I done diddled the title. I went Diddy mode on the title. Shout out to Diddy. Diddy parties? Real? Gay? Welcome back to The Woking Dead. I'm your host, literally woke. Alright. So the way that I've always described World Beyond is that it's like Stand By Me, but with zombies. The story begins 10 years after the apocalypse first began, as we follow 4 teenagers, Hope, Iris, Elton, and Silas, as they leave their community in Nebraska for the very first time to head on a cross-country road trip to save Hope and Iris's father in New York. The community they live at is part of the Civic Republic, otherwise known as the CRM, and is made up of 3 separate communities across the country. One in Portland, one in Omaha, and another at an unknown location, though this would later be revealed in The Ones Who Live to be Philadelphia. As we quickly learn, the CRM, more specifically their Lieutenant Colonel Elizabeth Kublek, has more devious intentions than they let on, with a conspiracy to take out their own communities for reasons that aren't made clear quite yet. As the kids make their way across the country, they start to learn a lot about themselves, each other, and the world beyond their walls. See what I did there? You know what's fucked up is I literally just did that joke like not even 2 minutes ago. That's fucking epic, dude. I'm gonna go kill myself, BRB. I recognize that a lot of people hate this just purely based off the concept, right? It sounds very much like a CW show or like a young adult novel or something like that, right? Teenagers fighting off an oppressive government, but they also have to deal with trauma, and, you know, and shit like that, right? I understand why a lot of people would hear that concept and go, oh, that sounds like garbage. But as far as the premise itself goes, I actually don't mind it in a few ways. While it does get a bit preachy and melodramatic at times, I actually like the idea of exploring what the first generation to grow up in the apocalypse is like. Now, we've had glimpses of this with Carl in the past on the main show, and was a much more prominent thing in the comics, but the show never really got to go too in-depth with it, even with later characters like Enid or Judith. I mean, Fear the Walking Dead, we had like that teenage perspective in the early seasons with Alicia and Chris, but they never really delved too deep into it, but it ended up just going in a completely different direction. World Beyond had the opportunity to do something really cool here, with the difference between these characters and other kids that we've seen before in the series is that the World Beyond kids have zero survival experience and have been living in a safe, sanitized community for a full decade. That's not to say that they don't have things that they need to deal with, because they obviously do, but it's a pretty fresh take on the universe that we haven't really seen, at least not in this same way. Like, we've seen teenagers before, but we've never seen teenagers who knew that the apocalypse was happening, lived in a sanitized community for 10 years, and then went out into the world to explore. It's pretty clear what they're trying to do, is my point. Above all, I will accept this kind of cringy premise because it takes The Walking Dead back to what it's supposed to be, which is characters growing and changing using the zombie apocalypse as a catalyst. Remember, The Walking Dead started off as a character drama first, a zombie show second, and World Beyond seems like it's kind of going in that direction. The show is entirely dedicated to the characters, their relationships, and how those relationships change, which, while that does sound very bare bones, it is way more than can be said for, like, the Fear reboot, for example, and I'll take this over that any fucking day. Anyways, the show opens with a very artsy sequence showing walkers drawn with this very cool sketchbook aesthetic, and then it gets into a montage showing the daily lives of some of our characters. We get a quick glimpse at a lot of their personalities, and overall, I thought it was pretty effective for what it was. Yo, the Come song goes so fucking hard, dude. Come in my ass! And with that, let's meet our cast, aka the Endlings, since I think it's a little bit easier to front load you with them and then get into the story from there, because I totally give a shit about organization at this point. You're gonna see that this video is not very organized, but whatever, I don't give a fuck. I think it's pretty obvious that Hope is meant to be the main character above the rest, so we'll start with her. Hope Bennett is, it's kind of a hard name to enunciate. Hope Bennett is a smart but troublesome teenage girl who lives at the campus colony. She is extremely gifted academically, specifically in chemistry, but is also a big troublemaker who uses her knowledge to her own advantage. You know, she brews her own alcohol, skips school, and generally hates the CRM. The reason being, they took her father, albeit willingly, to do some kind of research far away, with no knowledge of where he is, what he's doing, when he'll be back, and with zero contact with him whatsoever. Well, they do actually have contact with him, it's like a whole plot point, but you know, they're not supposed to, but you get the idea. The CRM separated this family. Her disdain for the CRM is made clear in her very introduction, where she stows away to visit her mother's grave outside the walls and commits petty pranks against Kublai. However, she also has a separate issue. She is still traumatized by what the characters describe as the day the sky fell, in which a plane crashed into their town during the initial collapse of society, which resulted in the death of her and Iris's mother. There is something about the situation that she has not been able to confront yet, though we'll get to that later. Overall, I liked Hope at first. She's the character with the most, character, if that makes sense, where she has clear feelings and motivations that you could totally understand if you were also a teenager, which I'm fairly certain most people watching this video either are or have been at some point. At least I hope so. If not, that'd be a little weird.
You know what? I'm good. I don't need to listen to this crap. Thank you.
Lieutenant Colonel, I'm so sorry.
It's okay. I am not.
And also, maybe it's just me, but I am a sucker for characters that are extremely smart, but either don't know it or don't show it, and then act in defiance of that intelligence. You know what I'm saying? It's like a very specific trope, but you get the idea. Like, I say this as a former gifted kid myself, not to suck my own dick, but I found it very relatable how we have a character that is portrayed as super smart, but doesn't care about that and just wants to goof off. It reminds me of my old schooling days, I say. I'm fucking gay and retarded. And while for Hope that desire to goof off comes from literal childhood trauma, I've always liked the juxtaposition of smart characters doing dumb shit. I also think I related to her just a little bit more than the others because she's a chemist. In real life, I am also a chemist. I'm a really shitty one, but I'm a chemist nonetheless. Unfortunately, I have the degree to prove it. I didn't really want this, but you know, my life is a mess. Anyways, what are we talking about? The chemistry aspect opens the door for some potentially cool ideas, like Hope using that knowledge for her own survival and shit like that. It's a very cool idea. Do they take advantage of it at all? Oh, absolutely not. But regardless, Hope has a good starting point. So far, we are 1 for 1 with characters that I like. Am I going to continue counting? Probably not. Okay.
It's Hope and Iris Bennett.
It's Stephen Flow!
Flow is on his way, yeah, yeah.
Next is Iris, Hope's sister, who is essentially her polar opposite. Hope is gifted academically, but doesn't care about any of that, while Iris is a lot more of an artsy people person, but puts her passions aside and becomes an overachiever with the goal to eventually follow in her father's footsteps. Also, elephant in the room, yes, they are adopted. It's like that show Pair of Kings, but woke. Shout out to the Woking Dead. The woke mind virus! The woke mind Iris. Shout out to Iris. Anyways, a lot of focus is put on Iris in this first episode, with the artsy sketchbook sequence we opened the show with being her dreams that she's been having ever since her father left. It almost feels like the show is trying to portray things through her point of view, when I thought it was the Hope show, but whatever. It's whatever. I'm gay. As she very directly explains in a therapy session scene, Iris feels like her overachieving comes from a place of wanting to please everybody. While Hope was there on the day that their mother died, Iris was not, and feels guilty that she wasn't there to help. Which, yeah, it's fine that you feel that way, but, you were also, 6 at the time, so, what were you really gonna do? When she and Hope find out that their father might be in danger, it's actually Iris who is the one that suggests they sneak out to help him, showing that, though she may seem studious and proper, she will always put her family first. Despite being opposites, Hope and Iris have one of the strongest bonds in the entire show, and as will later be explored, have complementary personalities. But, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. To go back to the therapy scene though, Iris's arc is made pretty obvious. She needs to learn to live for herself. She has spent all this time trying to please people to make up for her aforementioned guilt that now she has no time to live for herself. The only time that she has to reflect on herself and her life is in the therapy scene, and even that is something that she treats as yet another thing to cross off her schedule. There's a lot going on with Iris, but if I'm being totally honest, I kinda don't fucking care. The writers do a very good job at setting her up and getting to know her, but they don't really get you to care. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the acting, maybe it's that she is surrounded by characters that are much more interesting. I don't know, but whatever it is, I just couldn't get invested, and this is apparently a very popular opinion within the very minuscule World Beyond fandom. If I see the word misogynoir even once in my comment section, I'm coming after you personally. You want a piece of this? I don't think you want a piece of it. Do you want a piece of the Bruler, dude? Do you want a piece of the Bruler? I don't think you do. The next character we're introduced to is Silas, a quiet and reserved kid who has a rather dark past. Well, I guess every kid has a dark past in this show, but you get the idea. His whole thing is that he just recently moved to the campus colony for a fresh start, but his past still followed him as a rumor began to spread that he murdered his own father. So everybody views him as a monster and completely avoids him. He's kind of got that Naruto thing going on. Shout out to Naruto. Much of his arc throughout the season is everybody treating him like a freak, but learning that that doesn't need to define him and that he gets to decide who he is. Pretty simple. It gets a little more complex as the story progresses, with it being hinted at that he might really have these violent urges, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. And lastly for the main kids is Elton, a nerdy and studious type who wants to... well, I actually don't know what he wants to do. He doesn't really have much of a goal outside of just wanting to see the world as it is, instead of just reading about it in books or whatever. His parents were both scientists, or something like that, so he grew up to be very inquisitive about the world, and now he has the opportunity to see it for himself. Also, he's Gumball.
That's what the mask is!
Anyways, Elton was honestly one of the better characters in my opinion, specifically in how he parallels Hope. While Hope is smart but lazy, Elton is smart and ambitious, always seeking to learn more about the world. However, the two share some kind of existential dread. In the second episode, Hope confides in Elton about how she is bothered by the idea of, quote, ending up like the dinosaurs, that humans are probably going to be extinct at some point, and that their generation will probably be the last. Elton tells her that it doesn't bother him, because being the last of a species, scientifically known as an endling, is to be remembered as a defining moment for humanity. Despite knowing that he and everybody else are going to die one day, he finds solace in trying to make the most out of the time that he has, which is more or less the point of not only his arc, but is a major theme of the entire show. As someone who also struggles with existential thoughts, this scene was extremely cathartic for me. We've got these two characters who have gone full doomer, but have completely different outlooks on it, with those outlooks being defining parts of their arcs. This was the moment that truly got me invested in this show, because it was the first time the show had a point that it was really trying to make, and I felt that it did a pretty good job at humanizing these two characters. Granted, it is is pretty shallow all things considered, but it's a unique point of view compared to the other Walking Dead shows. The main show never really questioned the idea that they might be the last of humanity, since they always had that will to survive, and Fear took that idea even further before the reboot happened, so I appreciate that World Beyond switches things up and takes a long-term existential approach to the Walking Dead universe.
We're the endlings.
Endlings, huh?
What, we some kind of Suicide Squad?
But as I've alluded to, Elton parallels Hope, and this is the first of many character parallels in the series. The major way in which they relate is in their shared backstory. On the night the sky fell, a pregnant woman shot and killed Hope and Iris' mother. So in retaliation and or by complete accident, still not very clear on that, Hope shoots and kills the pregnant woman. And this is something that haunts her to this day. That's the trauma we was talking about earlier. However, big reveal, this woman is later revealed to have been Elton's mother and his unborn sister, which obviously creates a sense of tension between them even before either of them learn this information. This does create a bit of an annoying irony thing where the audience knows everything pretty much from the jump, and the characters slowly find out on their own bit by bit, so you're kind of just waiting for the full reveal, which on its own is kind of predictable depending on who you are. I thought this was also a good way to keep bringing up Hope's trauma without it feeling out of place and preachy like it's been for other Walking Dead characters, because the fact that Elton, an indirect victim of her actions, is not only present but a main character and friend to her, which adds on a whole new layer of potential drama. Now, is she gonna tell him? Is he gonna find out on his own somehow? Is this gonna ruin their friendship or maybe even turn them against each other? These are all very valid questions that this plotline raises. And secondly, since Elton is always around, Hope has a legitimate reason to be constantly reminded of her actions. Whenever she brings it up, it never feels out of place because Elton is always there, doing or saying something that reminds her of what she did. It was honestly one of the only compelling pieces of character drama in this season, and I thought it was pretty good. That being said, the drip feeding is fucking annoying. Listen, I would tolerate the drip feeding if we didn't also know the entire story right off the bat. You know what I mean?
That's what the mask is!
So, those have been the main endlings, as we'll call them, and I think that they're all pretty decent characters. I didn't particularly care for some of them, but it's hard to deny that they have a lot going on, but more specifically, that their dynamics are explored quite heavily throughout the season. Each character parallels another in some way, creating this kind of web of character interactions. You know, Hope and Elton have the shared backstory. Iris and Silas bond over choosing their futures, and once the adults are thrown into the mix, things get even more complex and kind of extremely obvious, but that's a different issue. I think the only one that doesn't really work is Iris and Elton, since these two barely interact, which is kind of weird, but you know, sure, whatever. Now, the thing about the group dynamic that I don't like is how abrupt it all feels. Like, aside from Hope and Iris, I really cannot buy how quickly these characters become good enough friends to the point where they decide to risk their lives together. Like, it's implied that Silas just recently moved there and met everybody, and there is nothing that ever indicates that Elton had any association with the girls aside from being classmates. The thing that brings them all together is Cyrus and Elton walking in on the Bennett's secret fax machine, and they agree to keep it a secret, but then a few scenes later, and they're all just like a group now, and they don't really show how they got there, you know? It feels like the writers were being told, hey, they need to leave the community by the end of episode 1 so we could have this big reveal at the end, so they rushed through some of the more important stuff, and as a result, the rest of their bonding throughout the season feels like it's kind of making up for lost time. It should have either been a group of friends decide to go on a life-changing adventure together, or a group of misfits are forced to survive together and become friends through their struggle, or something like that. But it feels like they try to do both at the same time, and it just doesn't really work that well. This is something the show tries to remedy later by giving Elton and Silas further connections to the Bennetts, but the fact that those connections are not established earlier is a little confusing. But this show isn't just about the kids, as there are also some adult characters that we need to establish as well. The first and most prominent is Felix, a security guard, or something like that, at the campus colony who serves as the Bennett's legal guardian while their father is away. He and Huck go after the Endlings when they discover that they're missing, and eventually join up with them and try to convince them to turn back. Felix is meant to be this older brother figure to Hope and Iris, but much like the group dynamic, I don't think they spent enough time really showing it. They show that he is somebody that the girls can confide in, and that he is somebody that their father trusts and even considers family, but it's never really addressed beyond a few small moments of why that's the case, or why we should care. Like, there's a moment where Hope says something along the lines of like, "We were so excited to have a brother, but you just never were one," or something like that, which implies that Felix has been distant with them, yet in the flashbacks it also shows that he does care about them, so like, which is it? Additionally, Felix is gay, which is revealed through a flashback showing his life just before the world fell apart, where his homophobic father kicks him out after finding out that he's gay.
Are you a faggot?
You can say that? I think you're a faggot.
That's like the main show when they said the N-word.
There are no
Now, the reason that I bring this up is because they build this up as a big thing in the second episode, hinting that his sexuality is going to become a major part of his character somehow. Except it never becomes that, and it's kind of relegated to just this episode. Now, I do see what they were going for with this, because again, the show is filled with character parallels. Felix's father kicked him out for being gay and wouldn't let him back in even while the world was ending. In the present, Felix is doing everything in his power to get his kids, even though they aren't his kids, to come back home, showing that he will accept them regardless of who they are and would risk his life for them, unlike his own father. Again though, this is kinda just a one-episode deal, and Felix is otherwise just kinda there for most of the season as a sort of voice of reason type character. He could honestly be qualified as an antagonist of sorts because his goal is to get the kids back home, but the kids obviously don't want to go back home yet, so his presence creates a bit of conflict. You know, he's kind of the bad cop in this situation, but his actions come from a place of genuine care. The problem is, again, we don't get enough of an impression of how much he really cares, so it doesn't feel as emotionally engaging as it should.
Dad, I'm gay. What's going on out here, Rick?
No, ain't no son of mine.
No.
Gay bastard.
So we've got the bad cop, now let's get to the good cop. A cab, motherfucker. Huck is first introduced as Felix's partner, or something like that, in his security detail, and she is essentially his opposite. Felix is a stickler for the rules, while Huck is a lot more laid back. At first, we don't know a whole lot about her, and this mystery actually becomes a big plot point later on, so I'll save it for later. Which, saying that in and of itself is kind of a spoiler for the plot twist, but sure, whatever. For now, what I will say is that they go pretty hard with the parallels yet again, specifically with Hope. Huck and Hope are given a lot of scenes together throughout the show, often with Huck asking Hope what she wants to do with her life, and occasionally teaching her some hard truths about the world. Both of them are laid back and chill as they front for something else, but for Huck, we don't quite know what her deal is yet. The fact that she is so secretive about her past makes you want to know a little bit more about her, but because we don't know a lot about her at first, she kinda has to get by on chill vibes to make her likable. I'll give her a pass at the beginning here because the plot twist later in the season makes up for it. So, that has been Team Endling, and overall, I think they're all likable enough, but at the same time, they're just kinda to me. I think they really wanted World Beyond to be like an ensemble show, right? Since there are a ton of characters that all get relatively equal screen time, but I think one of its biggest problems is that they don't feel like they get equal screen time, you know? Some character struggles are way easier to latch onto than others, and it struggles to make their struggles feel like they matter. You know what I'm saying? Some of them feel right at home in the Walking Dead universe, while others feel like they were ripped straight out of a cheesy CW show that the show is often compared to. It's pretty inconsistent, and there isn't really any one character with, like, main character energy, which makes it even more inconsistent. You know, the closest that we actually get to having a main character, like, you know, this show's version of Ricky Dicky Doo-Dog Rhymes, is Hope, yet there is just something about the way the show presents her that feels like she isn't meant to be that main character. Like, they spend so much time trying to give all these characters equal screen time, when I feel like it would have been a lot better if they just focused on one or two and really gave them the shits, and then, you know, everybody else was like a meaningful side character that also had their own arcs going on, but like weren't as important. Their problem is that they try to put everybody front and center as the most important thing, when it doesn't work like that. Like, the vibe is just kind of weird with these characters, and I really don't know how to describe it, so I think the best way you can get an idea is like just watching the show yourself and see what I mean. Granted, I'm sure there's a lot of you out there that are watching this video specifically because you don't want to watch the show, which is like, you know, you shouldn't do that, but like also, you know, thanks Nostalgia Critic, what do you think of that? But anyways, enough of that, enough of my bitching. Let's get into even more of my bitching. Let's get into the story. So, to reiterate, the show begins at the campus colony in Nebraska. Now, I feel the need to explain all of this since the show only kind of alludes to it, and it kind of operates under the assumption that you already know the deal. So here's the deal. So the CRM is made up of 3 different communities: Portland, Omaha, and a secret third one, which we later learn is Philly. The campus colony is an offshoot of the Omaha community and has strong ties to it, but is more or less its own community. The characters are only aware of Omaha and Portland, with Philly being kept a secret, which is part of what sows Hope's distrust in the CRM. To reiterate yet again, Hope and Iris's father, Leo, is a scientist who willingly left the campus colony to help the CRM with some kind of secret research that the characters assume is a cure. Before he leaves, he sets up a fax machine to keep in touch with his kids and tasks Felix with watching over them. Felix and Leo apparently have a pretty strong relationship, but it isn't really touched on until the finale, so I'll get to that later. Lieutenant Colonel Elizabeth Kublek comes to visit the campus colony for Monument Day, or the 10th anniversary of the day the sky fell, in order to improve relations between the communities, but also to start off a secret mission involving the Bennett sisters. What I like about the initial setup here is that it makes total sense how the characters are so survival illiterate, if that makes sense. Like, one of the biggest criticisms I saw in the trailers for the show was that it's like, oh, it's been 10 years and these characters are still so bad at surviving? Like, what's the deal with that? When I think people fundamentally misunderstand the context. It has been 10 years since the world ended, but aside from the initial outbreak, most people have been living in the campus colony, and I guess the wider CRM as a whole, completely peacefully. You know, the campus colony is a university, so it probably had a strong military presence when the world went to shit, meaning that they had weapons, and because it's a college, it's got housing, fields for crops, and they apparently do a lot of trade with Omaha. They literally have it made over there, so of course, nobody would ever want to leave, and those that do are typically unaware of the perils of the outside world and are certainly not built for it. Like, think about it this way. These teenagers lived in the regular world for 5-6 years. The world ends and then they go right into a safe community almost immediately. Of course they don't have any survival instinct. They've never had to survive. The world building is pretty solid, and there are some details that I really liked about it. Another example is that they have prison bars to go over the regular doors for people who are sick or at risk, so that if somebody dies and turns, they don't get out and kill everybody else and just ruin the whole community. Stuff like that. It's nothing major, but it's oh, that's interesting. That's cool that they thought of that, That's all I have to say about the world building, because it doesn't go that deep, but sure. So I think the setup here is pretty good, and the characters are introduced with so much potential to be interesting, but then the actual writing begins, and it's not that great. It's gonna take you out of it to a certain degree. It's that noticeable, but let's get into it. Let's get into the further lore, because I'm dumb and gay. I think the first time I noticed, oh yeah, Scott Gimple was involved in this, was during Iris's therapy scene, which I mentioned very briefly a bit earlier. I do not know why I'm doing this accent. It's not particularly bad, but it's written to be so on the nose that it's fucking painful. They basically spell out what Iris's arc is going to be, and the context is an excuse for her to simply just say what she's feeling instead of showing what she's feeling. They had a really good thing going with her Walker sketchbook dreams. It shows that she is an artist and that kind of, that is involved in her psyche, and that she's definitely thinking about the dead and the outside world and stuff like that. But then they just go out and directly explain them, and it's what the fuck are we doing? Show, don't tell. That's rule number 1 in storytelling. So if you want me to care about these characters, then show me why I should care about them. Don't tell me why I should care about them. But then the plot contrivances begin, and quite possibly the biggest one is Kublek giving the girls a map to their father.
This is the map to our father!
For context, Kublek approaches Hope and Iris in the middle of the night and confronts them about their suspicions. They don't like the CRM, and she is well aware of that. So in an act of good faith, she gives them a map of New York and tells them that that is where their father is. While this does seem extremely convenient, which it is, there is an explanation offered at the end of the season as a bit of a plot twist, and this moment does cement Kublek as a villain by showing that she likely has ulterior motives, because, why else would she do this, right? But my issue is that when the impetus of the entire story is that the villain decides to push the protagonist in the right direction for the sake of an end-of-season plot twist, you lose me just a little bit. The twist may be tolerated for sure, but it is pretty contrived, and I would have been much more okay with it if it weren't so direct. Maybe instead of Kublek just straight up telling them this, she does it a little more subtly. Perhaps she accidentally, quote-unquote, says something about New York that's just innocuous enough for nobody but Hope to notice. Or that she intentionally leaves some kind of breadcrumb for the girls to find that doesn't immediately make her look like she's the most direct human on the planet, you know what I mean? Or something like that, something that shows that she is trying to bait them while also not outright saying it. Because even from an audience perspective, it's so clear that she's trying to bait them. Also, another nitpick with this scene, Felix was apparently watching this whole thing go down the entire time, which is the only reason he knows which direction they went. That's a little contrived to me. I don't know. I personally would have handled this a little differently. Maybe the girls accidentally leave something behind that tells Felix where to go, or maybe Hope starts having second thoughts much earlier and leaves him a note, but regardless, this was kind of lame. It happens really quickly too, so if you weren't paying attention to this brief 2-second moment, you would never know how Felix figured this out. It's pretty messy, and honestly, the whole first episode is really messy. I don't think the plot contrivances get any worse than this, but it is certainly in service to my theory that this pilot was rushed out the door so they could fast-track the journey and have that stinger at the end that I'll get to eventually. However, it's contrived for a specific reason. I'm actually jumping the gun majorly by even insinuating that there's a big plot twist that explains this, but to get into it to begin with, there does require a bit of suspension of disbelief.
Yeah, you lost me with that one, family.
On a different note, the characters all have a signature weapon, likely to emulate the main show in some way. Silas has his comically oversized wrench, Elton has his little mini fishing rod, and Iris has the fossilized Triceratops horn tied to a stick. Oh yeah, get this shit, right? Elton finds this fossil, which was originally given to him by his parents, randomly in their travels, and decides to give it to Iris, who very haphazardly ties it to whatever this pole is. I think it's like a training stick or something. Now, I don't have a problem with this on paper, like, I get what it means thematically and all that shit, but this is definitely one of the least practical weapons I have ever seen in The Walking Dead. Like, it's just tied on there with a string as if that's gonna be even remotely strong enough for it to not fall apart the second you try to actually use it. Like, at least duct tape it or something, you know what I'm saying? Like, these two little tiddlywinks of string aren't gonna do nothing, dude. Like, you guys remember that channel Zombie Go Boom, where they would just, like, test zombie weapons from, like, you know, zombie movies and stuff? If World Beyond came out when that channel was active, I guarantee you that they probably would have tested that, the fossil pole, and it would have fucking snapped immediately. That being said, though, I actually think the Endling's signature weapons work really well here. Unlike Fear, where they just kind of gave them shit that looked cool, these actually fit the characters' personalities. You know, Silas is a big dude, so he uses a big weapon. Iris is artsy, so she uses a very artsy weapon with symbolism and all that shit. Elton is very smart, so he uses his fishing line in ways that enhance that aspect of him. Like, I'm not gonna lie, he gets some surprising mileage out of this thing. Like, I originally had this bit where I was gonna make fun of him for always holding it on land for no reason, but like, low-key, he kind of earned my respect with it, not gonna lie.
I'm a genius, Albert Einstein level history bookmaker.
Ironically enough, the only character who doesn't get a signature weapon is Hope, which is a little weird since she's kinda the main character. She uses one of the CRM's little retractable spear things, but it's really not all that special, and this thing ends up being Felix's signature weapon anyways, so like, you know? That would be like if they gave Rick Grimes, you know, the Colt Python as his signature weapon, but then he, like, you know, gets to the Atlanta group and they're all packing Colt Pythons. It's like, all right, well, that's no fun, you know? Since Hope is so smart and resourceful, I would have given her something to reflect that, or better yet, make it obvious that her smarts are her weapon. I alluded to this a bit earlier, but they established that Hope is a super smart chemist, yet she never really uses that knowledge in a way that matters. I think it would have been really cool if she did shit like, you know, MacGyver her own fireworks to distract the dead, or make her own explosives or something like that. You know, the point would be to show that she is resourceful in ways that others are not, because she has knowledge that other people don't have. However, the show doesn't do any of this, and it's kind of fucking annoying. But anyways, I'm still getting very much ahead of myself, so let's get back to the lore. The characters all leave on their journey. Felix and Huck go after them, and boom, that's episode 1. However, like I've alluded to, the episode ends by showing that the campus colony has been destroyed, and all of its inhabitants have been killed, all of which happens just after the Endlings leave. The perpetrator of this genocide? None other than the CRM themselves. This poses a rather important and intriguing question, that of course being, why would the CRM destroy their own community? This is a question that we currently do not have an answer to. And we're not going to have one until season 2. Might have dropped this one on us a little bit too early, guys, just saying. In all seriousness, I do think that this was the logical point to end the first episode on, because now our characters can't turn back. You know, they might not know that they can't turn back, but they can't turn back, which makes it a lot easier to side with the kids when turning back becomes a point of internal conflict. It also establishes that the CRM are the villains of the show, that they vastly overpower our characters, and that they work in ways that currently make no sense. And by making no sense, I mean that in a good way. It's a pretty effective note to end on that kind of makes you wonder where this is going to go in the future. Now, I'm not going to go episode by episode in this one like I did for Fear, or at least that was the intention, but there's a very specific scene in the second episode that I want to point out because I think it serves as a microcosm of what the show is. So, at the end of episode 1, the Endlings encounter their first walker, or as they call them, empties, and this scene spills over into the beginning of episode 2. They debate on how to handle it until Iris offers to be the one to kill it. But instead of just stabbing it in the head with her newly made spear, which, by the way, they have all been trained to do by Felix off screen, she just kind of like fucks with it in the most like incomprehensible way possible, and then she just like tackles it into a fallen tree. This is the most pathetic walker kill of all time because 1, just look at it, it's hilarious, and 2, it was a major missed opportunity. This is the first time the Endlings have come face to face with a walker, and I think this would have been a great opportunity to have one of them kill their first walker, which would officially cement the start of this new chapter of their lives. Instead, they fumble around it, which is very unsatisfying considering the whole episode has been building up to we are ready for this. And like, I get that the whole point is that they aren't actually ready for this, hence why they don't even end up killing the thing, but I think this moment is really a microcosm of the entire show. The point that they're trying to make is very easy to make, but instead of just getting to that point, we fumble around it for just long enough for it to become annoying. The fucked up part is that this isn't even the first walker kill, because they don't actually kill it. You know, Iris falls on top of it, pukes on it, and instead of killing it, which they all have the opportunity to do, they just kind of leave it there. The first proper walker kill doesn't come until a few episodes later, and I'm a bit mixed on it because I like the idea of kids aren't prepared at first, but they find the courage to fight, yet the original walker here is framed in such a way where it doesn't feel that way. You know what I mean? Does that make any sense? I don't know if that makes any sense, but you know what I'm... Like, it felt that this was supposed to be their prove yourself moment, yet that moment doesn't actually happen until much later, leaving this moment feeling more like an annoying subversion.
Let me ask you something.
Man, let me ask you something.
Anyways, moving on. So remember how for the pilot I complained about how the group dynamic doesn't feel fully formed yet? Well, they really play catch up with that in episode 2, which is almost exclusively about the endlings surviving on their own and bonding together. When I said that this show is Stand By Me but with zombies, this is the episode that I was picturing in my mind. This is where a lot of the dynamics, aside from Hope and Iris, are first explored, with this being the setup for the whole Hope and Elton thing, the whole Felix and Huck thing, you know, a lot of character building in this one. One of my favorite scenes in the episode is the Big Mo scene, where the endlings are surviving in a treehouse for the night and passing around a bowling ball that they found with the name Big Mo on it. It does a pretty good job of displaying their personalities and shows us some of that bonding that really should have been established earlier. It shows that Hope likes to goof off, but also that she likes to be something of a silent hero by drawing away the Beehive Walker, which, by the way, is cool as fuck. I love how Silas is shown to be very apprehensive about joining in the game, because dude, he's so fucking autistic. He's literally me. Like, he really just wanted friends, but is still kind of apprehensive about, like, actually engaging in that. And this is a sentiment that Elton seemingly shares, since we have only ever seen these two alone. I guess the real reason I'm mentioning this is because I think the idea of a guy named Big Mo is fucking hilarious for some reason. Hey, yo, it's Big Mo. Hey, how you doing, Big Mo? And he's like, hey, how you doing? I'm Big Mo. How you doing? I'll let you guys guess what race Big Mo is. Mo? We gotta do this for Mo. I'm Morgan Jones. I'm Morgan Jones. And I know, you were supposed to. But yeah, I know we have to do this for Mo. I know we got it. Shout out Big Mo. Big Mo! Also, there's a brief thing that Elton mentions where he says, like, nature always wins, or something very, very similar to that, and I'm like, oh, it's like Fear the Walking Dead when it was good. It's a shame this show isn't good, but, like, you know, it's like that, kinda. We're at the point where we're already regurgitating themes from the other spin-off. It's crazy. After this begins the Blaze of Glory arc, in which the endlings need to traverse through an area filled with tires that have been burning ever since the start of the apocalypse. It's literally like a Super Mario fire level, you know what I'm talking about? Elton falls in the lava and he burns his ass and starts hopping around going, ah! Put the Mario sound effect in there. Aside from being a really cool set piece, this arc is basically the treehouse scene, but put in practice, with a heavy focus on Hope and Silas. Hope decides to go ahead of the group while they're all asleep, which, by the way, still don't know how they can all sleep and not die of smoke inhalation, but, you know, whatever, sure. And essentially offers herself as bait to distract the dead and let the others through. It shows that she is sacrificial by nature, but it comes from a place of wanting to make up for her mistakes. I think it's handled relatively okay, and it ends up being pretty important by the end of the season, where sacrifice is a major theme. I mean, I'll tell you this, it's certainly better than whatever Fear was doing with that same concept, like making up for what I've done. It's like, all right, I don't buy that the Fear characters can do that. I could buy that Hope would do that. Meanwhile, we finally start to see inklings of why Silas is so shy and reserved, as he believes that he is prone to violent outbursts and wants to avoid hurting his new friends. This becomes a problem when he is the only physically imposing member of the group, so he is basically their de facto walker killer, except he's too afraid to actually do that lest he go into a fucking fugue state, so he opts to carry their bags instead and let them deal with the dead. This isn't too substantial for now, but it's more breadcrumbs that are worth mentioning, building up to the idea that eventually Silas is going to snap. By this point, they have made clear the Hope and Elton dynamic, but by this point, they are also starting to push the Iris and Silas dynamic. Back at the university, it's implied that Silas has some kind of crush on Iris, as she is the only person who has even remotely treated him like a person since his arrival. Now that they get all this one-on-one time, it could be a good time to really start exploring them more in depth. the extent of this is that Silas is afraid of his past mistakes coming back to haunt him, to which Iris reassures him that our mistakes don't follow us. Like, it's a real-ass quote, like, it's low-key kind of bars, but this is literally no different from some shit you'd see on Fear. Shout out to our pseudo-intellectual king, Scott Gimple. Good old Scotty Gimpies, baby. Scott Gimpy got me gimped up, you know what I'm talking about? Scott Gimple in a gimp suit. Call him gay old gimp suit Gimple. Felix and Huck manage to catch up to the Endlings, but they still need to escape the tire fire. As we established, Hope went ahead of the rest to activate a tornado siren and draw the dead away so the rest can get through. She finds the siren, but to add tension to the episode, it's broken, so she has to take it apart, but can't figure out how to put it back together. Now, I find this extremely amusing because by this point, we've established that Hope is supposed to be really smart, but this is the first time where that seems like it's a little selective. Like, okay, she's smart enough to take it apart, but not smart enough to put it back together. I don't know, it's a pretty silly writing choice, and while I am definitely getting ahead of myself here, at the end of the season, it's shown that her father discovered her intelligence when she took apart a computer and put it back together, making this moment seem a little bit ironic. Like, okay, she can take things apart and put them back together, but only sometimes. Now, maybe this was an intentional choice to show that Hope is still smart, just not under pressure, or something like that, but I think I'd be looking for depth where there probably wasn't meant to be any. Now, I don't think this is a major issue or anything, just a little nitpick. Obviously, you gotta add tension to the episode, so I get it, but like, you know? What is not a nitpick, though, is that this moment also establishes that Hope was having some sort of fight with her father before he left. This is all kinda dropped on us randomly in a throwaway line with no indication that it was a thing before, so it feels a little bit out of the blue. Although it does become important in the next episode, so put a pin in that for now. Anyways, Hope figures out how to get the siren to work, and she meets back up with the others. Now united, the group make their way out of the tire fire, with many of our characters finally having their very first prove-themselves moments, that they were probably supposed to have earlier, but they pushed it to now, because, you know, whatever. Hope and Iris team up and manage to kill their first walkers, which I thought was a nice moment, all things considered. Like, walking out of the smoke was kind of badass in a very CW kind of way, you know what I'm saying? You could smell the budget coming off of this fucking shot. Look at that. This is the first big instance that is meant to prove that Hope and Iris are a package deal, that one's strengths cover the other's weaknesses, and that they are unstoppable as a team. It's a little cringy and creechy, but, you know, it's fine, whatever, and it's a thing later in the season. So, you know, this episode is a lot of, like, establishing shit that comes back later. So it's kind of like in that regard, but like there's not much to say about it other than like, oh, this happens and it establishes this plot thread that'll go somewhere later, you know? It's kind of annoying, but like, you know, it's whatever. Now, something that I find absolutely hilarious about their escape is that there is low-key an implication that Silas might have super strength. So a big pile of tires is about to fall and block their path out, but Silas manages to hold them up long enough for everybody to get out and for Elton to grab their bags. I find this so fucking funny because you have Felix right there, who's like a full-grown adult, probably works out and shit, so he probably could have done this himself. But instead, it's Silas, who seems to fall under the he's big, so he by default has to be strong category. I would consider this nitpicking, but it's not very realistic in my opinion. But again, to reiterate, it is hilarious. We have the Hulk and it's fucking Silas. And honestly, the show sometimes throws a few jokes around here and there, and like some of them are kind of surprisingly landed. Now, I don't think Walking Dead shows need to have jokes in them, but a little comedy here and there never hurt anybody. Unless it ruins the tone of the episode, which World Beyond does. I was gonna say a lot, but it's only like kind of occasionally. They get a few zingers in there, that's my point. Is it tonally inconsistent? Absolutely. Did I still giggle? Also, yes.
The second I sound the siren, it'll clear a path for you. But you need to haul ass.
What? Haul what?
Ass! You need to haul ass to the exit.
Okay, well, I'm not very familiar with that terminology, and with stakes this high, I feel like we should be as clear as possible with what we're trying to say here.
Run, Elton, just run to the exit.
Shifting gears, at the end of episode 3, we get a brief epilogue scene with Kublek. One of her soldiers comes to her showing immense guilt over what they just did to the campus colony. She tells him to calm down, but not before turning on every appliance in her apartment in order to prove a point. Everything that the CRM has, running water, electricity, gas stoves, TV, all of that comes at a cost, and that the campus colony was eventually going to become a threat to all of that. He doesn't quite agree, so she has her CRM soldiers take him away. In the aftermath, Kublek can be seen crying at the table, showing that she also feels bad about the campus colony to some degree. This is a pretty great scene because it somewhat mirrors what Hope just did at the tire fire. Sometimes there need to be sacrifices, but somebody like Hope makes herself the thing to be sacrificed, while Kublek is willing to sacrifice others to achieve the same goal. Hope will risk her own life for her friends, thousands, but Kublek will sacrifice an entire community of thousands of people to save a different community for thousands of people. You know what I mean? The poster in Kublek's apartment is also of note here. It reads, "Self-indulgence at this time is helping the enemy," which was apparently a common poster seen around World War I. It essentially means that if you aren't active in helping the war effort, which in this case is survival against the dead, then you are basically helping the enemy win. There is a sacrifice that must be made in order for people to live in self-indulgence, but those people are often unaware of that sacrifice. And in this case, those people are the sacrifice. Dang. The irony is also pretty clear here. The poster warns against self-indulgence, but that is exactly what Kublek does to drown out her guilt. She essentially wastes all of these resources trying to prove that we shouldn't waste resources, and then takes advantage of said resources in order to not feel bad about saving those resources. You follow me? Put an Axel meme there, shout out to Axel. It shows a level of hypocrisy within the CRM's outlook on the communities that they claim to protect. You know, they'll obviously take out their own people to save others, but it makes you question if they'll go even further than that. It also humanizes Kublek a little bit in the sense that, like, she obviously feels bad for all of this, but acknowledges it as like a necessary evil, which makes her a pretty interesting character. It's a shame they don't focus on her like, at all, but fucking sure, whatever. The next arc has the endlings on the road, with one episode taking place in an old high school, and another has them building a boat to cross the Mississippi River. This arc really takes the time to explore these characters even further, because while we had that in the previous arc, that arc also had external conflict, and this one, not so much. The conflict is mostly internal for the next few episodes, which is, like, fine, I guess. I mean, it kind of works. You'll see, I guess. Now that Felix and Huck are here, we start taking the time to explore their dynamics with the kids, and the primary one that stands out above the rest is Hope and Huck, which I mentioned briefly earlier, but we'll get a little more in depth with this one now, and we'll talk about it a little more later. It's a kind of a recurring thing. They had a brief conversation in episode 1 about Hope making something of her life, but they've never really interacted beyond this. World beyond this, am I right? Got him! It turns out that the two have a lot in common in terms of their personalities, but their backstories couldn't possibly be any more different. Hope has flashbacks to her father right before he left the campus, while Huck tells a vague story about her father. As was hinted at in the last episode, Hope and Leo were having some sort of fight before he left, and here we get to see what that actually entailed. The first flashback has Hope showing up to her dad's office, angry that he never came to pick her up from school after getting in trouble for making stink bombs. He did this on purpose to teach her about consequences, but is also impressed by her ability to create said stink bombs. This is also our first major look at Leo, and it shows that he is firm but fair with his kids, and always has their best interests in mind. The next flashback is exactly what you'd expect, with Hope being angry at her dad for leaving, but he reassures her that he's doing it for a very good reason. These flashbacks are both paralleled and juxtaposed by Huck's statement that,
they just, have a funny way of showing they give a shit sometimes.
"I'm Huck, I put my tongue in my cheek," which has an obvious meaning here. Sometimes as a parent, you need to do things that you don't want to do for the safety of your kids. For Leo, this was leaving them behind, but for Huck's father, it's seemingly something else. They aren't very specific on that part, and that's likely on purpose, and I don't think we ever actually learned the answer, so, say what you will about that, but that's, yeah, you know what I'm talking about? Type shit. All of this is further paralleled by the H's encountering a wolf in the school, with Huck theorizing that it's simply just protecting its young. The wolf in this case is a symbol for fathers, or I guess parents in general, and how their actions can seem harsh, but are for the greater good. The greater good is also a major theme of the first season, with it being a recurring motif in Hope and Huck's dynamic. Huck is constantly trying to teach Hope about the greater good, how sometimes in order to get a good outcome, you have to do something bad and or make sacrifices. Hope is willing to make sacrifices, as we've seen, but not for the same reasons. She does it to make up for her own internal guilt, while Kublek and the CRM, like we just established, do so for more logistical reasons. Both are somewhat selfish sacrifices, but one is a little more empathetic than the other. Like I mentioned, sacrifice is a major theme throughout the show. Every character makes a sacrifice of some kind at some point or another, and believe me, you're gonna get a little tired of it. We're not even a quarter of the way into the show, and I already, kind of get the gist, you know what I mean? This is what I'm talking about earlier, where it's the point is so fucking obvious, but we're gonna, meander around it for 20 episodes, Meanwhile, Cyrus and Silas. Their names are so similar, I hate it. Meanwhile, Silas and Iris are locked in the gym together. Why is that so funny? Why is that funny? Meanwhile, Silas and Iris are locked in the gym together. So while they wait for the others to find them, they begin talking about all of their regrets in life. The gym was decorated for a prom or a dance of some kind, which causes Iris to feel that she missed out on a core experience in teenage life, further emphasized by her overachieving nature. Now, slight tangent, but I'll get back to this in a minute. This kind of makes no sense considering that they apparently had school dances back at the campus, since, I'm getting getting ahead of myself a little bit, but in season 2, Hope makes reference to a winter formal. Now, this could very well make sense if you assume that Iris just simply didn't go to these events, but considering she was likely organizing them on the prom committee or some shit, I find that a little hard to believe. Anyways though, the point is, she feels like she missed out on normal teenage fun, due to both the state of the world and her own goals getting in the way of that. Silas seemingly agrees, but expresses that he's more so glad that he no longer has to overhear people spreading rumors about him. Neither of these two have been able to have a normal teenage life, but for entirely different reasons, cementing some sort of bond between them. The two dance together with this whole like artsy sequence showing what could have been, or some shit like that, I don't fucking know. It's really fucking cringe. Like, this is like Fear Season 5 levels of like, hope in a dying world type shit. Like, I get what it means for the characters and all, but like, this fucking sucks, I'm sorry. Anytime any of the Walking Dead spin-offs have anything remotely like this, I want you to just look back at season 1 of the main show and be like, wow, can't believe they fucking did that. I can't believe this franchise had something like this when it used to be like this, you know what I'm saying? However, this scene does cement the idea that there is something between Iris and Silas, which is very important for Silas's arc. If you recall, which I'm sure you do, because that's like the only thing he's got going for him by this point, Silas was accused of doing something violent that got him sent to the campus colony. This is constantly implied, but they never actually outright say what it is until now. 4 episodes in, by the way. Nice going, guys. Apparently, Silas was accused of killing his own father in a violent rage, and he has been shown as trying to avoid violence so that he doesn't snap again and hurt somebody else. He's got the gentle giant type beat going on, you know? However, shortly after he and Iris leave the gym and meet up with the others, Silas goes sicko mode on a walker and bashes the fuck out of his head. He goes full Negan on that thing. He really glenned that motherfucker. In the process, he hurts Elton, and the only person able to snap him out of his rage is Felix? Guys, what the fuck are we doing here? Like, we just spent a whole 40-minute episode setting up that Iris is the only person who doesn't think that Silas is violent, and that even if he is, that their past mistakes do not follow them. She is clearly meant to be the Black Widow to his Hulk for all you fucking Marvel losers out there. It would have made perfect sense if it was Iris that was the person to be able to stop him, since it would emphasize that Silas has a soft spot for her and that she is able to ground him. Like, sure, they have like a little conversation about it after the fact, and it's great that there's at least one character that isn't totally suspicious of him, but it felt like they missed the point that they themselves made, you know? Like, okay, yeah, Silas has a crush on her and doesn't want her to get hurt, and she believes him when nobody else does. Like, this literally fucking writes itself, but we're just constantly avoiding it for some fucking reason. Like, this is such a simple thing on paper, but they somehow managed to fuck it up, you know what I'm saying? Moving on, episode 5, the mid-season, has the Endlings making it to the Mississippi River and building a raft to get across. This is kind of fucking stupid, but you know what? Fuck it. I don't care. Like, I have seen things that are 10 times stupider than this in the other Walking Dead shows. This is tame as fuck in comparison, you know? Anyways, this mostly serves as an Elton episode, as this is where we get his flashbacks. Every character seems to get those at some point, and now, it's Gumball's turn. Right before the world ended, we see young Elton hanging out with his parents as a nice, happy family, and all that shit. But then, things start getting bad, so his dad goes out to find his mom, and in the meantime, leaves him in a box so that nobody can find him. And I know that sounds like child abuse, but trust me, it was for his own good. His father doesn't come back, and after a while, Elton gets out of the box, discovers his dad's corpse, and makes his way to the university. And dude, pour one out for Elton's dad. Bro didn't even make it 2 steps out that door. That's fucked up, dude. That's such a fucked scenario. Like, alright son, I'm gonna leave you here. I'll be back in lickety split. Walk out the door, instantly get shot in the fucking head. Live League, baby, let's go. This traumatic event manifests itself as current day Elton being extremely claustrophobic, which is something that he must face in order to get the raft working. However, what he learns in both the flashback and the present is that he is capable of persevering. Kid Elton leaves the box even though he promised his dad that he wouldn't, while present Elton managed to overcome his fear, both of which ended up saving his life. The crux of his character is essentially that, yes, nature wins and we are all vulnerable to our most primal instincts, which for him is hiding. But humans are also able to adapt and overcome in ways that go against nature. The thing that makes humans human is that we can change our behaviors in ways that animals can't. It's the thing that makes us unique as a species, and I like how Elton is able to experience this firsthand since it ties directly into his mother's manuscript. His mother was writing about all kinds of shit like this, so I think him getting to live that is a very important part of his arc. That being said, I kinda wish they went a little bit harder into this theme, because while it works really well with Elton's arc, they kinda drop the whole like humanity humanity adapts thing for like the rest of the show. Like so far, the show's major theme has been about sacrifice, and this was a great opportunity to have a secondary theme about nature and survival, something that the Walking Dead universe is known for. And while Elton's little arc here does do that effectively, I felt that they could have gone a little harder with it. Have it apply to more characters, make it a more overarching thing. I also feel that this was a little bit undermined when Felix convinced Elton to help convince the others to turn back. Like he just had this whole mini arc about overcoming adversity, and now he's gonna like give all that up to like turn back. It's like, you know what I'm talking about? The big end tag of the episode is that this is where Hope finally discovers that Elton's mother was the woman that she killed 10 years ago. While this has always been an underlying thing, now it is front and center, which is worth mentioning because once they reveal this, they never shut the fuck up about it. And I know I kind of bitched about this already, but I'm gonna bitch about it again. This reveal also doesn't really work at all because the audience already knows all this shit. They also throw in this thing about Hope blaming Felix for her father leaving, which comes out of literally fucking nowhere, is never mentioned again, and doesn't even make any fucking sense. Like, why even include this? Like, what are we doing? Like, what purpose does this serve? And remember earlier how they mentioned that Hope was having a fight with her dad? This is kind of completely dropped by this point, and it doesn't really matter anymore, which begs the question of why even fucking include it.
It's driftwood, driftwood, more driftwood.
They got driftwood, and more driftwood. I'm the irate gamer. Hello everybody, it's Chris Boris here. I'm here watching The Walking Dead World Beyond. I believe they've ripped me off. Up until now, the show has been pretty samey for the most part, but I think episode 6 is where it really starts to find its footing. Keep in mind that that's 25% of the entire show, so, not a great track record. At the end of episode 5, Huck leaves to scout ahead, and almost immediately after, it's revealed that somebody has been watching the Endlings. And at the start of 6, we finally meet him. No reveal, by the way. The episode just kind of starts as if he's already been introduced, but like, okay, sure. No big reveal shot or anything. It's just like, okay, mysterious shadow in episode 5. Episode 6, there's a guy. This guy is Percy, a survivor around their age who, as far as the Endlings know, seems pretty chill. He tells them a few stories about his adventures in the apocalypse, but Hope susses out some inconsistencies and determines that he must have a car somewhere and asks to use it. He admits to this, but claims that it's been stolen by some dudes named Mike and Tony. The Endlings agree to help steal it back, which leads into our next arc. Oh, by the way, I was really hoping that Mike and Tony was a reference to the main show, since if you recall back in season 2, the two guys that Rick kills in the bar were from Nebraska.
Correction.
Unfortunately though, their names were Dave and Tony ends up being a completely different character in World Beyond, and they aren't even in Nebraska anymore, so like, I don't know what I was really expecting. It would have been a cool little connection, even if it is just using the names of some dead guys as a little Easter egg. New Rockstar's having a field day with this one. Hey guys, New Rockstar's here. Today we're gonna be counting down the top 10 fucking Easter eggs in The Walking Dead World Beyond. Number 10. This show has zombies in it, which is actually a very clever reference to The Walking Dead. Crazy idea. Does he know? Did he come? One thing that is made immediately clear is that Iris seems to have eyes for Percy. I just realized there's like an eye joke there. I didn't even recognize this. Iris has eyes for Percy. It's like because Iris is like a thing in the eye. Shut up. Don't even put this in the video, you fucking idiot. Anyway, the one thing that's made immediately clear is that Iris seems to have eyes for Percy. And honestly, I wouldn't blame her. That dude is a certified teen heartthrob.
I just wanted a piece of Percy's ass, you feel me?
This guy's the fucking Rizzler, dude. These two get a lot of scenes together and are generally very flirty. Like, you see where this is going, right? Well, Silas also sees where it's going, and given how close he had gotten to Iris by this point, he feels a little betrayed and doesn't trust Percy at all. Felix doesn't trust him either for obvious reasons, but for Silas, it is pure jealousy. Keep this in the back of your mind, it'll be important later, it ties into Silas's arc. Anyways, they have a whole plan, and the Endlings help Percy get the truck, but as it turns out, it was all a trick. The truck belongs to Percy's uncle Tony, and the whole story about the truck being stolen was a lie so that they could steal their supplies and get away. They succeeded in this plan, very cartoonishly mind you, and could have easily gotten away scot-free. But at the last minute, the con men come back to save the Endlings, and they all drive away together. This was clearly due to Percy having a change of heart because of his feelings for Iris, and claims that he wanted to return the favor because she thought that he was somebody worth saving. This sets up a bit of an interesting dynamic between the two, where Iris feels betrayed and Percy has to earn her trust back. This never goes anywhere, and the two are immediately cool with each other again in the very next episode. Sure, yeah. In the end, Percy and Tony join the group and agree to help them get to New York. Overall, I thought the con man reveal was fine, if a little predictable. In case it wasn't obvious, Percy and Tony were like magicians before the apocalypse, so they used that as like a skill to survive in the apocalypse. It's pretty sick. It's actually a pretty sick idea, I'm not gonna lie. Like I said, it's a little cartoonish with Tony throwing all their stuff in the truck without making a sound, with Silas somehow not noticing, or Hope somehow catching up to a moving car on foot. But the thing with the walker in the tub making it seem like there's a guy in there taking a bath was pretty clever. Slight tangent that's kind of semi-related, but there's a moment where Felix stabs a walker with a gun, which is kind of fucking crazy. It's pretty funny.
And a monkey walked right in, and I started beating it with a gun. Because I'm allowed to have my rights.
And again, while a little cartoonish, I think they did a good enough job at establishing Iris and Percy's whole thing to justify coming back for them. It also establishes that Percy and Tony are genuinely good guys. They just resort to chicanery as their method of survival. I think the idea of a magician using that level of trickery is a really cool idea that's never really been done before in the Walking Dead universe, and because they're magicians, they can kind of get away with being a little bit goofy. Honestly, Tony might be the fucking goat. Like, you seem chill, dog. Shout out to Tony. I don't drink, but Tony seems like he'd be a chill guy to have a beer with, you know what I'm talking about? In the interim, we get some additional lore about Elton and his mother's manuscript. He mentions that Hope's father once read it and enjoyed it, which inspired him to finish it. This obviously makes Hope feel even more guilty because, reminder, she now knows that she killed his mom. So to atone, she offers to help Elton finish the manuscript. This goes absolutely nowhere and is never mentioned again, with its purpose seemingly being to keep up the ironic tension between the two. This is also something I think would have been much better to establish earlier in the series, specifically before the group leaves the campus, since it would establish a better connection between Hope and Elton, and would give him a much more solid reason for wanting to go on this journey to begin with. Like, for example, his respect for Leo would give him motivation to help save him, and Hope taking an interest in helping him finish the manuscript before even knowing the mother reveal would make their friendship seem a lot more genuine. Granted, that wouldn't be entirely in character for Hope by that point, but hey, I'm just fucking spitballing here. Like, listen, I can bitch and moan all day, but if I don't make suggestions for how I would improve the show, then I would just seem like a fucking asshole, you know? Are these fucking kids, like, legitimately entertained by a fucking puppet show? Like, dude, if I was 17 and somebody tried to show me an avant-garde shadow puppet, I think I'd break his fucking knees with a mallet. Hey, I'm gonna fucking break, Tony, I'm gonna break your knees with a fucking mallet, hey. You see, the shadow represents death, and it's like, all right, dude, can you just come out as gay, please? But hey, it's my guy, Tony low-key the goat. Shout out Tony. I got my toes out and I got my knees out. Shout out Tony. It's your boy. Shout out to Tony. Episode 7 is a bit of a transitional episode, as now we have Percy and Tony tagging along, but the Endlings are still running low on supplies and don't really know exactly where they're going quite yet. To solve these problems, they hit up a CRM refueling station, something that was shown off in Fear, by the way, where they get not only fuel, but information. They discover maps and logbooks, both of which are heavily encrypted in such a way that the only people who can decode them are the CRM military. I realize that's kind of like saying ATM machine, like it's kind of redundant, but CRM sounds better than just CR, so I'm gonna keep saying CRM, fuck you. Fortunately, the Endlings are able to figure out where Leo is, but unfortunately, it's in the dumbest fucking way possible. So Iris and Percy are messing with the maps trying to find something, and by sheer coincidence, they notice that one of the CRM maps happens to line up with their map, thereby revealing the location. This is so fucking lame, I can't even comprehend why you would write this. Let's gather this for a second, right? Alright, so let me process this for a second, right? So you establish that there are characters like Hope and Elton who are very smart. Characters like Percy and Tony, who are masters of trickery of this exact variety. Iris, who is very artsy and might see codes in ways that others don't. And Felix and Huck, who are literally adjacent to the CRM military. And instead of using any of those character traits to figure this out in a fun and engaging way, you have it be sheer coincidence with no build-up whatsoever. You could have easily had Hope study the maps and be the first one to realize how they're meant to work because she's smart like that. Or have Tony figure it out because he's seen something like it before, which they kind of mentioned but like not really. Or hell, have all of these characters collaborate in order to find it, thereby improving the whole group dynamic and the way the audience views them. But no, it's just Iris and Percy who go, oh, look at that. It is so fucking lame. It feels like this discovery was fast-tracked for the sake of pushing the plot forward or reiterating the character's trauma again. It is a suck-ass reveal, and I do not like how they got to it. Maybe that's a nitpick, but like, I don't think so. Regardless, they determine that Leo must be in Ithaca, meaning that they now know where they're going. The Endlings take the night to celebrate, which leads to some great character moments. Now, considering what I just bitched about, ironically enough, this episode has a ton of great character moments. The problem is none of them are in like service to the plot, but you know, I just finished bitching about that, so you know, yeah, sure. There's a cute scene in the beginning where Huck gives Felix a Mountain Dew that totally isn't product placement.
Is this legit? Mountain Dew?
and there's a fun scene of the kids hanging out and playing Truth or Dare. Like I mentioned, Iris and Percy are immediately cool with each other again, in stark contrast to how they left the last episode where they claimed to need to earn each other's trust back, which I found kind of annoying, but it is done for a very good reason here, as Silas is getting noticeably jealous of the two. And when you're a guy like Silas, you can't not hate a guy like Percy for having W Riz. He's the cool Chad, Silas is an incel. Keep this in the back of your mind. But like I mentioned, during this little hangout session, the endlings are playing Truth or Dare. It goes fine at first, until Percy asks Hope to reveal the worst thing she's ever done. We, the audience, obviously know what that is, but she lies so that she doesn't have to talk about it. But Percy can tell that she's lying and tries to get a real answer out of her. And to make matters worse, Elton later tells Hope that she had given him hope, lol, that his mother might still be out there. She can't take it anymore and leaves the group crying, where she confides in Huck. She tells her everything about Elton's mom, but Huck reassures her to keep it a secret. And Huck clearly has some secrets of her own that are eating away at her. So this advice comes from direct experience, which leads to... At this point, we finally start getting backstory on Huck, which at this point was very much needed because of how little we truly knew about her. Before the world ended, Huck, real name Jennifer, was a Marine, and was still the fun-loving person she's always been. She has a friendship, or maybe a little bit more, with this guy, and she seems to be enjoying her life, even if her job comes with a little bit of trauma. But then, the world ends, and of course, the military gets called in to deal with it. After a certain point, her squad is told to abandon their mission and kill any civilians to stop the spread, which would have been a perfect opportunity to name drop Cobalt, but you know, they don't, but sure. Huck disagrees with this, and at the last second, turns on her fellow Marines, including her boyfriend, ultimately saving the civilians. In the end, she gives herself the scar on her face to match her dead boyfriend and serve as a reminder of what she's had to do to survive. I like how this backstory establishes why Huck is so dead set on the greater good that she's always going on about. You know, she talks to Hope all the time about how you gotta do bad things for the greater good, that it's not about right or wrong. And here we see that she truly does live by that code. It's also yet another example of sacrifice as a recurring theme, where Huck sacrifices her squad mates to save the civilians, aka doing something bad for the greater good. However, it also establishes that Huck is absolutely willing to turn on people that she considers close friends or even family in service to the greater good, which plants the seeds that she might not necessarily be trustworthy. However, it also establishes that she can and will disobey direct orders, which may or may not come into play later. I say, pretending that I'm not obviously alluding to a plot twist later down the line. Sure. Do you guys know the plot twist yet? If you don't, you're fucking stupid, but you'll find I'll talk about it in a minute. Ooh! Here's a cool little tidbit that I noticed. So when Huck's platoon is talking about the outbreak or whatever, one of the soldiers mentions that he heard that it came from space.
I heard it came back in a rocket, that it started in space. You know, somebody breathed it in, it turned their stomachs, then they got on a plane.
Shut up. This is very likely a reference to what Robert Kirkman has stated regarding the source of the virus in the Walking Dead universe, that being that it was caused by space spores. Now, this was likely just meant to be a little Easter egg for movie slop channels to spaz and froth at the mouth over, but it could have actually been really interesting foreshadowing considering that Season 2 is partially about finding a cure. Spoilers, but this whole space thing is never mentioned ever again, which I think is a bit of a missed opportunity there if you ask me, but you know, it's a cute little reference. Shout out Robert Kirkman. You guys think Robert Kirkman has ever sat through this show? I don't think so. Robert Kirkman, if you're watching this video, let me know if you've seen World Beyond. I'm gonna guess the answer to that is no. You probably haven't even seen a goddamn frame of this one. Oi, mate, I'm Robert Kirkman. I am Robert Cockman. I've got my cock. I've got my big old Robert Cockman out. So, the Endlings now know where they're going, they have reliable transportation, and everybody is in relatively good spirits. But of course, there's a problem. After Iris falls asleep looking at a cute little art exhibit that Percy made for her, she wakes up and goes looking for him. Instead, she finds Tony going full Glenn mode with his head bashed into paste. Percy is nowhere to be found, and a blood trail that leads directly to a drunken Silas. The implication is pretty clear. Silas was jealous of Percy for essentially stealing Iris from him, so he got drunk, blacked out, and had another violent outburst, killing Tony. R.I.P. to my goat, Tony. This brings us to episode 8, titled The Sky is a Graveyard, which is quite possibly the best of the season in my opinion. The group is trying to come to grips with what just happened, with everybody now being afraid of Silas since it so clearly looks like he did it. Each of them are in different stages of this. Felix wants to bring him to Omaha and have him arrested, Iris and Elton are in various stages of denial, and Hope is doing something. I'm not entirely sure. However, the perspective I find the most interesting is Silas himself. He doesn't remember anything, so even he thinks that he did it, which causes him to doubt himself yet again. This leads into the Silas flashbacks, where we finally get a full picture of what happened that caused all those rumors back home. As it turns out, his father was very abusive, and one day this turned physical, causing Silas to fight back. He beats the shit out of his dad in self-defense, and when he comes to, he finds that he's still alive. The neighbor intrudes and Silas gets her to leave, but when he turns back around, his father is nowhere to be seen, implying that he got up to tend to his wounds. But later, he finds his father's walker, confirming that he did, in fact, kill him, or at the very least was responsible for his death, which is just another fancy way of saying, yeah, he fucking killed him. He freaks out and hides in his room, leading to an even earlier flashback of Silas as an even younger kid. His dad is introducing him to music, and the two are having a good time, something that Silas seems to have valued greatly with how much the guy is constantly listening to music. But he is eventually forced to face reality when he hears his mother come home, resulting in Silas violently slamming his walker dad's head on the floor right in front of her, ultimately saving her life. Despite that though, even his own mother thinks that he is a violent psychopath, explaining why he was sent away to the campus colony to begin with. This is by far the best set of flashbacks in the whole season, particularly because it feels so real, grounded, and complex. Yes, Silas's dad was an abusive dickhead. He yells at him for no reason and he beats him and his mom. Not a good dude at all, and Silas was totally in the right for fighting back. But I love how it shows that a dysfunctional, abusive household isn't always a dysfunctional, abusive household. Even fucked up families still have those wholesome moments, like listening to music together and shit like that, and it makes you wonder if Silas's father was always an asshole, or if he only became one after the world ended, which the flashbacks are likely implying. Or maybe that's just Silas's perspective. Maybe he remembers as a kid, like, oh, I like my dad, but then, like, oh, it turns out he's an asshole, because he, like, grew up and realized, oh, wait, you're a fucking asshole. Regardless, though, I like how it shows that even though Silas's outburst was totally justified, he still feels bad about it because it was hurting somebody that he once loved. And now he's done it yet again, except this time he hurt Iris and the rest of his friends by breaking their trust and making them feel unsafe around him.
Took a sip of the Jose, everything turned red for 8 minutes. Woke up in Geneva. Oh man, I did it again, didn't I?
This culminates in a conversation with Iris, who desperately wants to believe that he didn't do it, but is unable to deny the obvious evidence. Silas confesses anyways, because, reminder, he also thinks he killed Tony, and he tells Iris,
I'm sorry you met me, but I'm glad I got to know you, Iris.
And walks off to be on his own. Dude, this made me so fucking sad. This might be the first time this show has gotten me to feel literally fucking anything. All the dude wanted was a fresh start. He wanted to be seen as anything other than a monster, and now even the people he found who like him are jumping on that bandwagon. His friends can't trust him, and now he can't even trust himself. The final shot of Silas leaving his headphones in the street represents how he's leaving his old life behind. Music was his coping mechanism, and leaving that behind shows that he is ready to face the real world that he has been trying to hide from. Like, I didn't give a flying fuck about Silas before, but by this point, dude was my favorite fucking character. Like, I want to see my guy get help. Hashtag free Silas. Free my guy Silas. He ain't done nothing wrong, yo. Free my guy Silas, dude. Hashtag free Silas. Free Bobby Shmurda and free Silas. But maybe Bobby Shmurda first, then we can free Silas. But do Bobby Shmurda first. I think Bobby Shmurda's actually free. Actually, is Bobby Shmurda dead? Didn't they fucking get him? He got got? Didn't Bobby Shmurda get got? I think he got got. I think he got killed by COVID. Is that real? Now I'm curious. I'm not gonna look this up right now. I don't have time for this. While the others are debating what to do with Silas, Elton claims that he doesn't think that Silas did it. He thinks that it was all a misunderstanding because he's noticed that he has only ever seen Silas commit violence in self-defense. So his goal is to prove his innocence somehow, which he now has the perfect opportunity to do after Hope confesses to him the truth about his mother, seemingly out of nowhere. But I guess this couldn't have really festered any longer. I guess so. Sure, yeah. She tells him everything, and he goes full doomer mode. Hope had given him hope, lol, that his mother might still be out there somewhere, and now she has crushed his dreams entirely by telling him the truth. She gives him the marble necklace that she took from her 10 years ago, and the scene just kinda ends with Elton walking away in tears. I felt that it was a little bit lame that these two had all of this tense build-up to this reveal, and then when it does actually happen, nothing more really comes out of it. It's a really anticlimactic end to an arc that I thought was kinda genuinely interesting. In fact, I think it would have been a great idea idea to have done this kind of shared backstory thing between more characters, since that was part of what made the whole Hope and Elton thing even remotely interesting. But this is how they reveal it, and then it kind of just sits on the back burner for a little while. In the following episodes, Elton seems to genuinely forgive Hope because she obviously didn't know any better, and he isn't really mad at her. Rather, he's mad in general that his mom did what she did that night because it ruined his perception of her. He had grown up believing that his mother was a thoughtful, kind, intelligent woman, and based on the flashbacks, that was likely true. So the fact that she committed such an act of violence just doesn't sit right with him. The very person that he has been trying to live for this whole time turns out to have been not who he thought she was. He reacts to this by tearing up the manuscript he's been trying to finish, an act that he immediately regrets, and in trying to collect the pages, he comes across none other than Percy, who is alive and not so well. Somebody has shot him in the shoulder, but the identity of the shooter is unclear.
I mean, you're the closest thing to a leader we have.
Elton thinks Iris is the leader, lol. At the end of episode 8, we are shown a flashback to right after the Endlings crossed the Mississippi. During this time, Huck went ahead to scout the area, but in reality, she was meeting up with Lieutenant Colonel Kublek. As it turns out, Kublek is Huck's mother, and she was sent on a deep cover mission at the campus colony, with her goal being to separate the asset from the rest of the group. It's unclear who in the group the asset is, but what is clear is that Huck has been a mole the entire time. This flashback now sets up the next leg of our journey, in which Huck attempts to do exactly what her mother ordered. Her goal is to separate someone from the rest of the group, and at first, they try to make you believe that this someone is Iris. This is the first time that Huck and Iris have really interacted so far, and it really fucking shows. Like, these two have nothing to talk about. Like, it's so awkward. Like, that's the point, obviously. Like, I'm not trying to criticize it for that, but I think it's amusing. Huck mentions that she is a lot like Hope, but that Iris is who she really wanted to be. Now, whether or not this is a lie is unclear, but regardless, they're trying to make the audience think that Iris is the asset. And it's not really working, because Hope is very obviously the asset, since it's been foreshadowed since the very beginning. Like, I originally read Huck and Iris as being a misdirect of some kind, but knowing that Hope is like obviously the asset, it changes your perspective a little. It reads a little bit less like the writers trying to misdirect the audience, and more like Huck trying to create distrust between the sisters. Like, Huck has already tried getting to Hope, and it hasn't really worked very well thus far, so okay, maybe try a different approach. Let's maybe try getting to Iris and getting them to not trust each other. Meanwhile, we get some more character development for Felix, who has kinda been on the back burner for a while. We get flashbacks to the campus, showing how Felix met his boyfriend Will, and the drama that unfolded between the two before Leo left. While preparing to leave the facility, Leo has to choose who will be on his security detail. Felix wants to be the one to go, but Leo instead tells him to stay behind and watch over the girls. And in an awkward dinner scene, Will reveals that he will be the one on security detail. Despite their relationship, Will actually volunteered to go, with his reasoning being that he didn't want Felix to be worried about Leo all the time, which ironically had the exact opposite effect, because now Felix is worried about Leo and Will. Felix's arc here is seemingly about not bearing other people's burdens for them and not feeling responsible for others. This is fine as a concept, but it's yet another instance of the show giving us a potentially interesting character stuff way too late with far too little context. Felix is a character that we have known since the start of the show, and they are just now giving us the crux of his character arc, and even then, a lot of the context is implied. It's only implied that Felix has some pre-existing relationship with Leo. He has a lot of respect for him, but because we are only ever told this, we have no emotional attachment to it. Why does Felix respect Leo so much to the point where they consider each other family? Why does he feel the need to protect Leo? These are all very important questions to make this entire situation between Felix, Will, and Leo work, yet we are only given vague implications with no emotional investment. I propose a flashback, an even further flashback, if you will, to shortly after the world ended. This hypothetical flashback would detail how Felix and Leo first met and show how the two grow to respect each other so deeply. I don't care how they do it, but I think something like that would have added a lot to both of these characters. That being said, Felix's arc is partially also about putting his faith in others, and this is put to the test in the present. The flashbacks parallel the present, where Felix now has a leg injury and can't walk or drive, so he needs to put his faith into Iris to protect him. Up until now, the roles have been reversed. It's always been Iris and the kids looking to Felix to protect them, but now he's looking to them to protect him.
You are more than capable, Iris. You are. I believe in you.
But back to the plot, this is where the facade finally starts to fall apart. By this point, we know that Huck is the mole and is being forced to accelerate her mission, and she has the perfect opportunity to do so when Felix hurts his foot, which, spoilers by the way, she directly causes by slashing his Achilles. How he even recovers from this at all is fucking insane. This dude is built like fucking Batman, dude.
Oh my god, you are fucking Thor.
Hold up a second.
No, didn't.
Anyways, Huck's plan here involves injuring Felix so that he can't travel, driving a wedge between Iris and Hope so that she can get Hope alone, and then take her to the CRM. However, this is not without its nuances. Firstly, Huck is shown feeling very bad about what she did to Felix. The two were genuinely friends, and she has seemingly grown to genuinely care for the others as well. It obviously eats her up inside to do this to them, but reminder, she is a believer in the greater good. If she'll kill her fellow Marines, she will obviously slash her friend's Achilles, no fucking problem. Further emphasizes that side of her character, I fuck with it. Secondly, Hope catches on to how Huck is trying to manipulate her. This causes an argument between her and Iris, with Iris not trusting Huck while Hope actually defends her. Ironically enough, the fact that Hope caught on to the fact that Huck was a liar ended up putting Huck's exact plan into motion, which is pretty interesting. She's clearly lying here based on her following actions, with her reasoning being a bit flimsy. It does further the theme of sacrifice, where Hope wants to confront Huck alone because she doesn't want to drag the others into it, so she sacrifices those relationships in order to do so. However, the fact that she doesn't tell Iris this at all, despite the two both believing that Huck is out to get them, is a little strange. You know, it's that dumb cliche that TV shows do where one character keeps the other characters in the dark specifically for a plan to work, even though both of them knowing would benefit the plan. It's a little convoluted and they never really justify it, so it's kind of convoluted for no reason. While all that is going down, we pick up with Elton, who has been dragging an unconscious Percy around for God knows how long. And he does my absolute favorite thing in the Walking Dead universe. Hallucinates! We all love hallucinations, right guys? Elton starts hallucinating that Percy is conscious and giving him life advice, and because it's a hallucination, I hate it on principle. Hallucinations are a lazy way to have a character externalize their thoughts to the audience instead of literally anything more interesting. Regardless though, hallucination Percy tries to convince Elton to leave the real Percy behind. However, he is still reeling from the truth about his mother and starts to become conflicted. Realizing that his mother did what she did, his whole worldview starts to shatter. You know, maybe Hope was right back at the tire fire. Maybe there is no point in even trying anymore since they're just the last generation anyways. He considers leaving Percy behind to save himself, but ultimately comes back, grows a pair of balls, and takes out the walkers approaching him, marking his first walker kill in the series, and is the last of the endlings to do so. This represents how now he is a true survivor, and much like earlier, he became one because he overcame his nature. His first inclination was to just run and leave Percy to die, but he overcame nature yet again and came back and risked his life to save him. This further emphasizes Elton's humanity, but also demonstrates how survival instinct and the human ability to adapt can both coexist. Because of this, he no longer thinks he's the last generation, but rather the beginning of a new generation. And that is kinda where you lose me. Granted, I think these are both fine themes to include, and they both work for his character, but this feels way too early. Like, okay, Elton adapting and growing some balls is fine. It's character growth that's been teased for a while, right? Realizing he's the first of a new generation kinda comes out of nowhere here. And while something like this works for him, it doesn't work quite yet, if that makes sense. Like, this moment doesn't really have anything to do with his views on the future or whatever. This should be reserved for much later when this whole, like, you know, first new generation thing makes more sense within the narrative, i.e. after they deal with the CRM. I like Elton and his arc, but the writers were really jumping the gun with this one. At least that's what I think. I don't know, maybe it's just, I don't know how to explain it, maybe I'm crazy, but I felt they were jumping the gun. After his big revelation, Elton is finally able to reach somebody on the radio, and this just so happens to be Huck. She tries to find out where he is, but before he can tell her, Percy wakes up, revealing that Huck was the one who shot him. This isn't really the best reveal out there, considering that we know that Huck is obviously the traitor by this point. However, it is confirmation that Huck was the one who killed Tony and framed Silas. Again, it's predictable, but like, you know, makes sense.
Sure.
Speaking of Silas, Elton and Percy eventually catch up to him and tell him the truth. He is relieved that he didn't do it and agrees to help them find the others. Unfortunately though, the CRM catches up to them, likely due to the fact that Silas burned down an entire building for no fucking reason. To protect his friends, Silas sacrifices himself and is arrested by the CRM, allowing Elton and Percy to escape and find the others. Again, this is more of that sacrifice theme that this season is so obsessed with. And honestly, I think it kind of works for Silas. You know, it's a nice scene, all things considered. That being said, sacrifice is kind of Hope's thing, so I think it's a little weird how Silas gets a sacrificial scene. Like, I guess the theme isn't character exclusive. Like, I know I did mention earlier that every character kind of sacrifices something at some point or another, but this specifically felt out of left field a little bit, at least as far as Silas has been characterized thus far. Like, he has been the guy who is afraid of himself and afraid of hurting the people around him, and while his actions here make total sense given the context, it doesn't quite feel like something Silas would do. Like, he just found out that he isn't the monster that everybody thinks he is and can get on with his life. So the first thing he does is use himself as bait and potentially ruin his life yet again so that his friends can get away. I mean, I guess that's the tragedy of it, right? Like, he finally gets a true fresh start, but ruins it by giving himself up. But again, it's that the decision doesn't feel earned, for lack of a better term. Like, there's no build-up or foreshadowing for it, he just kind of does it for no reason. At least not one that's been presented to the audience. Like, overall, I thought it was a nice scene, but it's a little inconsistent.
Protect Iris. Keep her safe. But no matter what Huck did, don't be the monster.
That's called motherfucking bars, nigga!
Back to the main crew, Hope figures out how to crack the coded logbooks that they found at the refueling station. And once decoded, reads, Raft embed agent en route to New York with asset +4. All 4 expendable. In simpler terms, Huck was a mole the entire time, as we already know, and her mission was to deliver an asset to New York with the lives of the others not being her concern. Hope determines that she must be the asset, very humble of you by the way, and tries to draw Huck out to get answers. She eventually does get these answers, with Huck outright confirming her suspicions. Her father was never in trouble, and the CRM intercepted their messages and used them to get the kids to think that he was. The intention was to get Hope to leave on her own, and the others tagging along was not part of the plan, hence why they are expendable. The reason that Hope is the asset is because her father has vouched for her intelligence, and Kublek and the CRM thinks that intelligence could be useful in finding a cure and restoring the world. Now you might be thinking, why? Why go through all of this just for one person? Why not just take her against her will? Well, they needed her to want to leave the campus and to see the world for what it truly is. The idea is to get her on board with their crusade by showing her just how bad everything is so she can want to fix it. While this is a little convoluted, it does make sense to some degree. You know, they're using Hope's own psychology against her to make her think that it's all her idea, when in reality, she'd never had a choice. Personally, I think this revelation does a great job at reaffirming something about Hope's character, which is that she needs to learn to make tough choices for the greater good. Like I've mentioned to death already, sacrifice is a very prevalent theme in World Beyond, and Hope is the most blatant example of it. She was willing to sacrifice herself for her friends to escape back at the tire fire. She and Huck are constantly discussing the greater good throughout the season, and here in the finale, she is forced to join up with Huck and the CRM, even though she doesn't want to, because it is the only thing that'll keep her family safe. She's even willing to take her own life and act in defiance of her potential in order to get Huck to not kill Felix. Her whole life back at the university was living for herself, but through this journey has learned to live for the sake of others, but at her own expense. Felix and Iris eventually figure out Huck's shtick, so they go after her, resulting in a fight and standoff at a burning building. Finally, some good fucking action. I'm Bear Grylls. What's his name? Gordon Ramsay. I don't know, I thought Bear Grylls. Like, say what you will about this show, but this fight is sick as fuck. Huck finds herself in a position to kill Felix, but to stop them from fighting, Hope holds a gun to her head and threatens to kill herself if she doesn't let him go. She obliges because she can't lose the asset, and the two come to an agreement. Hope promises to go with Huck to the CRM as long as her family is kept alive. The season ends with Hope and Huck meeting up with Kublek, who welcomes Hope into the CRM. She clearly has a much larger plan for her that not even Huck is aware of, which opens up some potentially interesting plot threads. Felix and Iris stumble across Felix's boyfriend Will, who is seemingly with some sort of anti-CRM resistance group, as he informs them about the fate of the campus colony. But most importantly, we end on this. Earlier in the episode, Leo recounts how he discovered that Hope was so smart, where when she was really young, she took a computer apart and put it back together, which, if you ask me, isn't all that impressive. Like, dude, I was building computers when I was like 14, but then again, I had YouTube tutorials and she figured it out on her own. You know, okay, so maybe I'm stupid, I don't know. Not the best way to establish this, but you get the idea. I'm just nitpicking for a cheap fucking joke, which isn't even funny now that I think about it. However, at the end of the day, we learn that she didn't do this entirely alone, as she had a little help from Iris. This is meant to represent how, though the asset is Hope's intelligence, her intelligence isn't the thing that makes her an asset, if that makes sense. The thing that makes her an asset is her relationship with Iris, since the two have complementary personalities which are able to bring out the best in each other. Hope is smart, but Iris makes her smarter. Iris is something, but Hope makes her something. Not really sure how this applies to Iris, honestly, since she has, like, no personality, but you get the fucking idea.
I have no character.
The two are a package deal, and by splitting them up, the CRM just made a huge mistake. During their goodbye, Hope tells Iris that she is going to be the one that saves the world from the CRM, believing in her drive and tenacity. This seemingly sets up Iris's arc for Season 2, where she needs to become a leader of some kind. You'll never guess what Season 2 doesn't do. But that is not all, because throughout the finale, we get brief scenes of Leo at the research facility. Like we established, he is safe and sound, proving that Huck is telling the truth, and he even appears to be dating someone. This woman, Dr. Lila Belshaw, was first revealed in a post-credit scene back in episode 4, but here we find out that she is involved with Leo. In fact, she is seemingly the reason that the CRM wants Hope, because Leo told her about how smart she is, so Lila believes that she could be an asset in her mission of finding a cure. However, Leo expresses that he has suspicions about the CRM and what they're doing. But Lila already knows because she's the one doing the suspicious stuff. This is all set up for Season 2, and honestly, I had no opinion on it here. Like, this is all set up. There isn't really anything to have, like, an opinion on quite yet. You know what I mean? What I will say, though, is that I honestly forgot how early a lot of this stuff was set up. We first see Lila and her experiment in episode 4, which is way earlier than I remembered. Granted, it wasn't a post-credits scene that the show does not tell you about, so kind of would make sense if you missed it, which I'm sure I probably did on my first watch. But this all indicates to me that the writers probably really wanted to get into CRM cure stuff right off the bat, but were forced to do all of this shit first. Yet, when you consider that they knew this was going to be a 2-season deal, it kind of makes you wonder why they went with this if they really wanted to do that, Like, okay, we want to tell this story about the CRM and finding a cure and, maybe it's something about the scientists and rebelling against the CRM and all that shit. All the shit that Season 2 has that I'm getting ahead of myself with. So instead, let's make the first season a cross-country road trip with a bunch of kids nobody fucking likes, you know what I mean? But I'm getting sidetracked. So let's conclude this bitch. Overall, the first season of World Beyond is very messy and very slow. But it is also far from the worst thing I've ever seen in the Walking Dead universe. The show does a pretty great job at setting up these characters and getting to know them pretty intimately, and when the story is actually progressing with all the mysteries and shit like that, it can be genuinely engaging. The writing isn't particularly great, and the dialogue could absolutely use some work, but above all, I think its biggest problem, and I really want to emphasize this here, it's the pacing. This show is so fucking slow. Because there are so many characters, we need to delve into each of them individually, which obviously takes up screen time, but they also need to forward the plot, which also takes up screen time. And they somehow could not figure out a way to do both of those things effectively at the same time. On top of that, the show feels so much longer than it actually is because it is so fucking repetitive. Like, it low-key feels like it was made to be watched while half paying attention on your phone. You know what I mean? Because so many of the character interactions are them just repeating shit that we already knew about them in different ways, and we retread the same ground over and over again. Like for example, right? How many times is Hope going to explain killing Elton's mom? How many times is Huck going to talk about the greater good? How many times is Felix going to try to convince everybody to turn back? It's very repetitive without outright being repetitive. So half the season feels like fucking padding, because they're just repeating shit in slightly different ways. Like, you could have probably cut out a decent amount of shit and gotten to this exact same point in 6 episodes instead of 10. That all being said, the characters are the real kicker for this show. And like I've mentioned, they're all pretty hit or miss, and it's going to depend very heavily on who you are as a person. Personally, I thought that Hope and Elton were kind of interesting, and Silas eventually grew on me. But the other 3 were such wasted potential in my opinion. Felix was cool, but he could have been way cooler. Huck was interesting, but at the expense of being a repetitive and predictable twist villain. And Iris had a very promising start with 0 fucking payoff. And I think that Kublek worked pretty well as a villain, but she isn't really present for most of the season. Which leads me into another problem that I had, which is that there isn't really a villain. Most of the conflict is almost entirely internal, which on paper is fine, but it feels a little bit weird because there's no external conflict to force the internal. Kublek and the CRM are obviously meant to be the villains, but their presence is not felt whatsoever until season 2. So a lot of season 1 feels like the characters just meandering around with no real sense of urgency. Like, they have a goal, but it never really feels urgent, or at least not as urgent as it should. Overall, I think season 1 is just fine. Which is to say, it's not like unwatchably terrible, at least in my opinion, but it isn't really like breaking any new ground. Like, it's not the worst thing I've ever seen, but I would also very much struggle to call it good in any capacity. Not particularly goated with the sauce. I would not go as far to say that. That being said, I remember season 2 being a lot better, so we'll just have to wait and see. After this intermission. Here's an intermission, guys. Shout out to intermissions. I'm gonna send this one off to Intermission Matt for your one and only intermission in this video. I'm black. Whoa! G Willikers, baby. It's the intermission segment. This is your favorite part of the video, right? Right? What the fuck was that? Somebody driving a fucking truck in my backyard? What the fuck is that? Well, since this is the only intermission segment I'm gonna get in this video, I'm just gonna promote my shit right off the bat here. Social medias. I'm on all the social medias. Twitter, Blueski, Instagram, all of them. I'm on all them bitches. I'm mostly active on Twitter. That's kind of the only one I'm active on. But if you want to follow me on the other ones, feel motherfucking free, baby. I don't give a fuck. And if you're watching this video on the day it comes out or shortly after and want some more Walking Dead content from me, then please be sure to subscribe to my second channel, Matt's Meme Hole, or follow me on Twitch or Kick. Links are in the description, because I am currently in the process of doing a blind playthrough of Telltale's The Walking Dead. My only experience with Telltale's Walking Dead is that I played episode 1 like 10 years ago. That's about all I know about it. So we're going into this completely blind. It's going to be fun. So if you want more Walking Dead type beat, go follow me on my live stream platforms. It's going to be motherfucking lit, motherfucker. I will probably be doing a Telltale Walking Dead video at some point. Just using the, because I'm streaming it, I might as well do a video out of it. So I'll probably do something about that regarding that. So you maybe look forward to a Telltale video. I'm not gonna promise anything. And I was trying to look for things to talk about for this intermission segment regarding World Beyond, but there's like nothing to fucking talk about. There's so little to talk about because this show really does not have an active fandom. Really, even Fear the Walking Dead, as shitty as it was in the later seasons, still has an active, dedicated fandom around it. There is I could not find a single such thing in World Beyond. The craziest thing I found was there were a couple of shipping edits that I found on YouTube. There's nothing about World Beyond on the fucking internet. It's crazy. There's no fandom to really talk about. I don't know. I mean, the cast seems pretty chill. Nicholas Cantu, he played Gumball. He's like a Ninja Turtle right now. He's done stand-up. He's kind of done it all. Minecraft. Seems like a pretty interesting fella. I don't know half the shit a lot of these other people have been in, but it's pretty interesting, I guess. The lady who played Huck, whose name is escaping me, she was on an episode of Big Time Rush. I just think that's pretty funny. I couldn't find a single clip to use from that was in the video that was funny, so I'm just gonna mention it here, I guess. Dude, I couldn't even find funny set photos from this show like there are for the other Walking Dead shows, because World Beyond was being filmed during the very start of the pandemic. So they were probably not allowed to be touching each other, which I guess in hindsight explains a lot of season 1, because they were outside and shit like that. I don't know.
Coronavirus!
Anyways, go watch my Walking Dead streams. In fact, send me Walking Dead video essays if you want me to react to them on stream for the second channel. I don't know, just do that. I got other videos on the way. I'm black. Season 2 picks up almost immediately from where we left off, where Hope and Huck have joined Kublek, Iris and Felix have gone off with Will's group, and Elton and Percy are still around somewhere, doing something. Much of the premiere focuses on Hope, with Kublek forcing her to survive the night in the remains of Albany to prove her dedication to the CRM's cause. Before this, though, she breaks to the two H's the truth about Omaha. Well, at least her version of the truth. Kublek reveals to them that the campus colony and Omaha are both gone, but lies that it was the work of a herd that surprised and overwhelmed them. I like how this further shows how manipulative Kublek can be. She'll twist around these half-truths to get Hope to join them, but keeps out some of the finer details in case that pushes her just a little too far. A little bit generic, but I think it works. She's kind of keeping Hope at arm's reach at all times, so she hates the CRM just enough to not want to leave. Kublek is clearly testing Hope to see exactly how much of a problem she could be in the future. Since she knows that she hates the CRM, she just needs to know how much.
It's okay to hate us, Hope. You should.
I'm Lieutenant Colonel Elizabeth Kublek and I'm British for some reason. I'm British, but my daughter has a southern accent. I don't know how that's possible. At the same time though, Kublek is also testing Huck. While the whole trip across the states was Huck's idea, Kublek was the one who okayed it, and she seems to have some level of doubt as to whether or not Huck is even still on her side. She seemingly suspects that her time with the Endlings made her too attached and wonders if she may have some kind of ulterior motives against the CRM. Their conversations throughout not only this episode, but the majority of the season have a clear tension between them. Now, whether or not this was intentional is up for debate, but regardless, I love how it displays such a complex mother-daughter relationship. You know, where do they stop being family and start being soldiers? The line is a bit blurry, and they towed that line pretty closely throughout the season. Huck is very clearly playing both sides here, because she has an obligation to her mother, but also seems to genuinely care for the Endlings to a non-insignificant degree. We get to see where her loyalties truly lie, until that stops mattering halfway through the season, but we'll get to that later. During Hope's night in Albany, she comes across a survivor who has clearly gone completely insane. She recognizes that this woman was just once a normal person who has been twisted by the apocalypse, but is unfortunately forced to kill her in order to save herself, officially marking her first kill in the series. Well, I mean, I guess technically her third kill, but like, I guess it's her first intentional one. If we want to count, I don't know if we want to count this one.
Double kill.
This moment is seemingly her breaking point. She cannot take living in the shit anymore, so she pledges her allegiance to the CRM. While it's kinda obvious to everyone involved that she is only doing this to get to her father, Kublek plays along and lets her into the facility. We finally get that Leo and Hope reunion, which, while pretty generic all things considered, wasn't without its emotional weight, since their brief flashbacks in season 1 established a much deeper bond between them that we now have the opportunity to explore in depth. If there were any two characters that I'd want to see interact more given everything we learned about season 1, it's these two. However, this would also be a good time to properly introduce Lila, who throws a wrench into the whole dynamic. Lila is one of Leo's fellow scientists at the facility, and as was revealed in season 1, the two have begun dating off-screen. You know, at first she seems chill and all, you know, nice lady, but it's revealed quite early on that she was the reason that the CRM targeted Hope to begin with. Leo mentioned how smart she was, and Lila thought that that would be useful to her research, setting off the entire series. In her brief appearances in season 1, it's clear that she knows a lot more than she lets on, and is definitely hiding something. And this is retained throughout season 2. There's a level of disconnect between her and pretty much every other character, and given that we know what the characters don't, it makes you wonder how genuine she really is. Keep all of this in the back of your mind, because she'll be important later. Meanwhile, Will takes Iris and Felix to the Perimeter, a colony of artists who have a deal with the CRM to remain autonomous, but secretly want to help take them down. By this point, Will makes clear his suspicions about Omaha. He knows that it's gone and heavily believes that it was the CRM's doing, but he has no proof. Regardless, he tells Iris and Felix this anyways, and they just kinda go along with it. Okay, like, plot-wise, this is really fucking flimsy. Like, the whole spark for their little rebellion is that Will has a hunch that something bad happened, not even an educated hunch, mind you, and the others go along with it for seemingly no logical reason. I mean, granted, after what happened with Huck at the end of the last season, it makes sense why they wouldn't be completely trusting of the CRM, but it feels like they only really believed this because it was Will that told them. Like, if this was any other character, I really don't think this would work. Speaking of other characters, it's here that we are also introduced to Indira, the leader of the Perimeter, who at first isn't really all that important, but just put a pin in this for now because she'll be important later.
What do you live for?
I guess I live for hope.
The world is nothing without hope.
Jesus fucking Christ, Gimple is at it again, dude. Gimple speak aside, this moment establishes Iris's new goal for the series, which is that she will do absolutely anything to get her family back, which she proves by killing a CRM soldier in the dead of night. Logic aside, this solidifies the Dark Iris arc, where she is so determined in her goal that she is on something of a warpath, which becomes a bit of a problem when she wants to go in guns a-blazing. I like that after season 1, where she did basically nothing, she actually has something interesting going on with her character now. You know, she's having all these hallucinations of walkers melting into CRM guys, symbolizing how, in her eyes, the CRM and the dead are one and the same. Or at least that's one possible interpretation of it, since the show isn't particularly clear about what this is supposed to mean, and considering how shallow this show really is, I'm inclined to believe that they just did it because it looked cool. You picked that gun because it looked cool? Anyways, remember how I just said to put the logic aside for a minute? Well, let's pull that logic back in since I really want to make fun of this scene. So Iris, who by the way has only about 6 weeks of combat experience against walkers, sneaks up on this lone CRM soldier and shoots him with a crossbow Daryl Dixon style, and later stabs him to death. Bro really thinks she's him. Like, are we going to acknowledge how little sense this makes? Like, dude, okay, she's like, what, 16 years old? Using a crossbow for presumably the first time, because we've never seen her do it before, in the dead of of night, so she likely can't see shit, and shoots this guy through his armor. This is fucking hilarious. Listen, I'm not one of these people that thinks that there's a woke agenda in the entertainment industry or whatever, but I can see why the stupidest people imaginable would think that there is when shit like this happens with zero buildup. But again, it's more of a logical inconsistency, and you guys know I don't really give a fuck about those. Regardless though, she has taken Will's theories to heart and truly believes that the CRM took out Omaha, so now she and Felix are out to make things right. But first, they need proof. Also, I wrote in my notes here, Will might actually be the GOAT, and I have no fucking clue what I meant by that, but it's going in the video, so I really don't fucking care anymore. Moving on, we later pick up with Silas, who, if you don't recall, was arrested by the CRM at the end of Season 1. Since then, he has been assigned to decontamination duty under the supervision of his new boss, Dennis. Or like, D's nuts. Got him. Dennis and Huck are fucking, or as I call it, hucking. So keep that in mind. At his new job, Silas and the other kids need to draw out the dead and systematically take them out to keep them away from the facility. It's a pretty shitty job, but the others seem to be a-okay with it, since they see it as their doorway into the CRM military. They are all very patriotic about the CRM and want to do their part, which I think does a great job at displaying how effectively the CRM has indoctrinated most of its citizens. Like, they are objectively genocidal against their own people, and like we've seen to death already, view that as a necessary evil to provide safety and stability. But the average citizen obviously doesn't know about any of that, so the CRM are cool in their eyes. The CRM is viewed by its citizens as their saviors, something to strive for to be part of something greater. But as we know, that isn't the case. This is good world building, and it makes the CRM out to be much more than they've been portrayed as thus far. It seems as though this is also a critique of nationalism, or something adjacent to that, to some degree, since these kids are all very gung-ho about joining a genocidal regime that they don't know is a genocidal regime. Like, at first I really didn't think this was a thing, like I didn't think this was a present theme at all, but the show is pretty much a young adult novel, and young adult novels love critiquing oppressive governments. So, I think there might be something to it. But you know, it's some thematic bullshit here. It doesn't overstay its welcome. It's cool, it's fine, sure. Sure. After this, we pick up with Elton and Percy, who have since found a horse and have been traveling for some time. They come across two kids their age, Asha and Dev, and accidentally piss them off.
Holy shit, they were turnips!
They get caught and are brought to none other than the perimeter, where they reunite with the others. It turned out that Asha and Dev were Indira's kids and knew exactly who Elton and Percy were. They just wanted to fuck with him. Commitment to the bit. I like these two already. Elton begins getting rather close with Asha as the two bond over their differing views on existentialism. Meanwhile, Percy and Iris start taking their relationship to another level, which is to say, they start fucking is gross. And hell, while we're at it, I give so few fucks about this relationship, it's not even funny. It came out of kinda nowhere in season 1, but you could chalk that up to just being your standard teenage crush, right? It doesn't really go anywhere deeper than that, and you know, it's not really that huge of a thing in season 1. So it was kind of cringe, but it was like tolerable then, you know? Now that they've reunited, they try to explore their relationship deeper. And dude, I don't care. Iris has always been very boring to me, even with what Season 2 has been doing so far, trying to elevate her character, and Percy honestly hasn't done much to make me even really care about him, so the two of them being together does nothing for me. Every scene between them feels like they're just whispering sweet nothings to each other. Emphasis on nothing because nothing of value is actually being said. I literally could not tell you off the top of my head a single notable thing that these two say to each other, especially since Iris talks almost exclusively in Gimple speak. Now compare this relationship to, say, Glenn and Maggie from the main show, and it just feels so shallow in comparison. I'll give it points. This actually could have been something, but it really ended up being nothing. Like, I can't think of a relationship I cared about less than this.
It weirds me out. I feel so uncomfortable looking at all these mixed children.
But back at the research facility, Leo has Kublek on the fucking ropes, dude. He is tired of all the lies and half-truths that they've been feeding him about the whereabouts of Iris and Felix, and is even willing to walk away from his entire job if he doesn't get answers. Like, bro is making the fucking demands, dude. Hell yes. However, Kublek knows about the secret messages that he was sending to his daughters, which according to CRM law is highly illegal, and she holds that over his head to keep him from walking. He later tries to do the same thing to Huck, but she tells him to calm down and that she doesn't know anything either. This begins a bit of a trend for the season where nobody trusts Huck at all, even though she's often telling the truth. Because of the way that she double-crossed the Endlings, nobody believes anything she says, even though she is trying to help them a lot of the time. It's kind of a boy who cried wolf type beat, you know? Anyways though, I got a little sidetracked. This is is the first extended look at Leo, and I like how he isn't portrayed as your generic scientist character, which is kind of the impression that you get from Season 1, granted he isn't in it very much. In Season 2, he's angry and is willing to stand up for himself and his family, which you wouldn't usually expect of a scientist character, who are usually portrayed as weak and afraid to speak up. I guess a good Walking Dead example would be Eugene or Milton from the main show, where they're these kind of these cowardly little bitches, but Leo's like kind of a fucking alpha male, dude. He's kind of a Sigma. Leo goes all out right off the bat for his family, and it immediately made me respect him. While all of this is going down, Hope is going to school now. Totally don't even want to kill myself right now. Yeah, a school plotline is pretty cringe and gay, and it is unfortunately necessary for the plot to progress, but luckily, it's only for a little while, so if you're like a real spaz about zombies not being killed on screen at all times, then call me titties. Alright, this establishes a few major things. Firstly, while Lila is giving her a tour of the facility, Hope meets a guy named Mason. Bro is rocking the broccoli fade 10 years into the apocalypse. It's crazy that even 10 years into the apocalypse, in their version of 2020, they're still rocking the broccoli fade. Alright, dude. Chill. The two hit it off and become friends rather quickly, with the implication of some romantic tension between them. And the dude kind of has W-Riz, not gonna lie. He's kind of the Rizzler. Shout out to the Rizzler. While Mason becomes somewhat important later on, their relationship right now shows us the disparity between characters who have and have not been outside the walls. Mason and the other students have lived at the CRM for most of their lives. You know, they've never really had to fight or survive or anything like that. They even get vacations and shit like that. It's pure apocalyptic coddling. Hope, and by extension the rest of the endlings, have obviously been out there and know how bad it is, which keeps them from fully relating to them. It's almost like a really toned down version of when Rick's group first got to Alexandria. However, it's because Hope has been outside the walls for an extended period of time that gives her a much different perspective on the research that they do at the facility. You know, the others live normal lives, so they don't really have any drive to find a cure because they don't really live in fear of the dead. But Hope and the others have that drive because they've seen how bad it really is. They don't want to go surviving in the woods anymore because that shit sucks. I mean, or maybe it doesn't suck. Maybe you're into that. Maybe that's fun for you. I don't know. It honestly kind of proves Huck and Kublek right in a way, where Hope's journey in Season 1 really did show her how bad things were and made her want to fix it. Something that she is seemingly cognizant of, but also kind of denied for a while. Like, a lot of the first episode is like, oh, I'll never be like you. I'll never fucking conform to you. But it turns out they were kind of right. They were kind of spitting bars, low key. Secondly, the school plotline further establishes that Hope is really fucking smart.
Like I'm a genius, Albert Einstein level.
During her class, she comes up with an idea to use yeast in conjunction with her father's fungus research in order to increase walker decay, and her teacher actually thinks that this is a very promising idea. Later, the other scientists bring her in and tell her that her theory might actually work, and while they obviously need to do more research, she might have finally cracked the code. Now keep in mind here, this isn't necessarily a cure in and of itself, it's just a way to make walkers decay at a normal rate. Since obviously in the Walking Dead universe, whatever the walker virus is, I think it's the wildfire virus, makes the walkers decay slower than a regular dead body. So, lore. That's some lore for you. This is also another instance of the CRM being right about things. Kublek was right about letting Hope see the world, and now Lila is right about Hope's intelligence being the key to a breakthrough. This is also the first time that Hope is able to use her smarts in an applied setting. She finally sees why she's the asset, and for the first time, has an actual purpose. You know, before the trip to find her dad, she was completely directionless, and even on the journey, she was a little unsure. But now, she has a way to make a difference that she actually wants to do. Well, I don't think I explained that very well. My point is that Hope is starting to see her own potential that everyone else has been telling her about. And though she still doesn't trust the CRM, she does believe in what the scientists are doing there. Ooh! Another dumb side thing for you, but I want to point this out since I think it's so under the radar. So, one of the scientists and Hope's teacher is a guy named Dr. Ellis. Leo later calls him by his first name Terry, and his classroom has a poster for the Human Genome Project. If any of that sounds familiar, that's because back on the main show, when Eugene was introduced, he makes mention of his scientific idol, T. Brooks Ellis, who worked on the Human Genome Project.
My old boss, T. Brooks Ellis, the director of the Human Genome Project. He said my hair made me look like, and I quote, a fun guy.
This character was subtly hinted at like 6 years before World Beyond was even a thing, and while they obviously didn't intend for this to mean anything back then, I think it's really cool that they referenced it in this way. Now, my complaint is that this dude is barely a character at all. Like, as one of the leading scientists working on the cure, it would have made a lot of sense for him to get more screen time with characters like Hope and Leo, or even Lila, but there's so much else going on in the story that they don't really have time for that. I mean, like, I get it, the show isn't really about the cure, that's just kind of a plot point, but I think it would have been cool nonetheless. badass. I also kind of hope they bring this guy back in the future to have him like meet Eugene or something, because it would be kind of weird to introduce him, reveal that he's survived the apocalypse all this time, and then just never have him meet Eugene at all, you know? I don't care if it's like a 2-second cameo, I need Eugene to meet T. Brooks Ellis. It needs to happen.
I also lied about T. Brooks Ellis locking my hair. I do not know T. Brooks Ellis. But I did read one of his books, and he seemed like the type of guy that wouldn't blink twice at a Tennessee top hat.
Oh, also, another stupid thing that I noticed. The computers at the facility are all running Windows 10. For context, in the Walking Dead universe, the apocalypse started in 2010, but Windows 10 wasn't released until 2015. So this should not be possible.
Boy, I sure do hope somebody got fired for that blunder.
Can't beat that.
That's just plain wrong.
Anyways, back to the story. Hope freaks out at a party after remembering that her sister and friends are still missing. So she asks Huck to take her to Iris and Felix. Which, by the way, can I mention how gross it is that they're drinking out of beakers? Like, as somebody who has worked in labs, the very sight of that disgusts me to no end. Like, I'm sure these things have been exclusively used for booze, but like, my brain just tells me something gross was in those things, you know what I'm saying? Anyways, Huck obliges and brings Hope to the perimeter, where we get some nice reunions. I mean, keep in mind it's been like, 3 days in universe for these characters. These reactions are like a little bit overkill. Oh, it's been 3 days since I've seen you. I need to hug you for 45 uninterrupted seconds. It's like, let's fucking relax, all right? The reunions with Huck are a little less wholesome though, since Percy and Felix specifically are still mad about what she did back in season 1 and do not trust her whatsoever. Percy wants to kill her to avenge Tony, R.I.P. the GOAT, and Felix wants to kill her for lying about everything and almost getting them killed and for being a traitor. Even though Will explains how Huck can't turn them in because she would expose herself in the process, and even though Hope vouches for her, the others simply cannot get over Huck being on their side because she has given them no reason to trust her. And she is certainly not helping her own case. Huck tells Felix that Will is dead, which is something that she genuinely believed to be true, except he's not dead, and Felix knows this, so he thinks that she's lying to him. It's classic girl who cried wolf situation yet again, and as cliche as it is, I think it works for Huck's character. By this point, Huck has been on every side of this conflict imaginable. She got close with the Endlings, and was also a high-ranking member of the military alongside her mother, so she has some level of loyalty to both sides. But now, with all the lies and shifting loyalties, she's actually pretty isolated. The Endlings don't like or trust her anymore because of, deceiving them, and the more she tries to play both sides and get her mother to relax or spill the beans, the rift between them grows as well. She doesn't really have anyone to turn to right now except for her husband Dennis, and she can't even have him because they're both roped into this whole thing and being pulled in different directions. The flashbacks throughout the 4th episode of the season depict Huck right before she begins her deep cover mission in Omaha, and I think this was included to parallel how she feels in the present. She gave up her mother and her husband to go undercover, and allowing them to break her arm to make it more believable shows her dedication to the CRM. Now that she's back from her mission, she has seemingly regained everything that she left behind, but nothing about them is the same. Her relationship with her mother is weird, for lack of a better term, and she and Dennis are clearly having trouble rekindling whatever spark they once had. The only other people she could turn to are her friends the Endlings, but none of them want anything to do with her, even when she is genuinely trying to help them. Huck is so unbelievably isolated right now, which is something that I think sets her apart from other double agents that we've seen before in the Walking Dead universe. Somebody like Dwight on the main show was more of a redemption story, and somebody like Dante was just a twist for the sake of there being a twist. But Huck is a little different because she was already a compelling character before all that shit. Like, Dwight and Dante were compelling characters because of their whole plot twist, but Huck was interesting before that. And when I say compelling, I mean compelling by, like, World Beyond standards. It's not particularly great, but, like, for the standards of this show, it works. She is by far one of the most interesting characters on this show, and there were points where I felt genuinely bad for her and wanted to see her redeemed. That being said, the show goes out of its way to keep the others from trusting her to almost a cartoonish degree, which really bogs this whole thing down. Like, the whole accidental lie about Will being dead was a little silly, and Felix's bar right here goes pretty fucking hard.
I'm not gonna kill you tonight. No, I just wanted to know what it's gonna feel like when I do.
That's called motherfucking bars, nigga!
But it's just a little over the top, and the fact that she conveniently doesn't know the things that other characters ask her is just kind of annoying. Like, oh, Huck, you know about this? Do you know about this? No, I don't know about that. You're lying! This show loves its dramatic irony, things the audience knows that the characters don't, and Huck's entire character is pretty much predicated on this, which again, kind of bogs it down a little bit. Though above all, The worst thing that Huck has ever done is snapping the spaghetti when she throws it in the water. As an Italian, this offends me. Fuck you. Oh, another thing that annoyed me. So remember Huck's flashback in season 1 where she gives herself the scar? The implication was that this was something that she did right after the events of the flashback. You know, she kills her platoon at the start of the apocalypse and then gives herself the scar as a reminder. In this flashback though, this is seemingly changed to be right before she went undercover at the campus. So it's kind of weird that they took a pretty big moment from season 1 and then retconned it in a way that doesn't work nearly as well. Like what was the point of that, you know? On the flip side to all of this, Elton sees that Hope is back, but cannot bring himself to confront her. Reminder, it's only been a few days since he found out that she killed his mother and unborn sister, so the wound is still pretty fresh. He has a realistic depiction of a panic attack, and Asha is the first to comfort him. The two share with each other their beliefs about the dead, where Elton is still somewhere in his doomer arc, while Asha views killing walkers as her way of letting their spirits free. This kinda goes nowhere for a while, but it establishes that Elton and Asha kinda have a thing for each other, which also goes nowhere for a while. I also kinda just hate whenever The Walking Dead shows do this thing where characters have like rituals for the dead or whatever. You know, like, oh, killing them sets their spirits free and shit like that, right? I think Sadiq did this on the main show. Fear had a few different versions of it, and it's something that I've always been kind of iffy on. Like, it's teetering on the whole, like, oh, we're the real monsters thing. Like, it's like not exactly, but it's like kind of the same vibe, you know? It's like, it's more like, oh, the zombies were the real victims. Like, no, they're not. Shut up. You know what I mean? I don't know. I've never been a fan of that kind of thing, although I do fuck with the existential vibe. Also, just a couple random nitpicks I noticed. So, Percy's bullet wound is still a thing. He is still suffering from his bullet wound from season 1, which makes sense because it's been like a few days. But Felix's leg is already pretty much basically completely healed. Reminder, Huck slashed the fuck out of his Achilles. There is no way he recovered from that in like 3 days. No fucking shot. There's also a moment where Percy goes missing to go kill Huck, and the way they find this out is that Felix finds Percy's bandages, and he goes,
"Where are you going?" Okay, I think he's alive. Okay, I think Percy's alive, and if he is, he's going after Huck.
Which doesn't make any fucking sense for him to say that because he knows that Percy is alive. He was there when Percy and Elton got back to the perimeter. At least I'm pretty sure. Maybe I'm forgetting something, but like I'm pretty sure he knew that Percy was alive. So like why the fuck did he say this? Anyways, in the interim, Huck reveals that Silas is alive and points everybody to the direction of the decontamination center. So they all go off to find him and get him to join in their plan, which he eventually agrees to because he's a simp for Iris. Before this, however, I gotta say, I kind of fucked with Silas' story this season, which I started to introduce earlier, and then I got completely sidetracked, so, you know, this video is very organized, guys. So like I said, he gets brought into decontamination duty against his will, and is told that what he's doing is very important, and that if he works hard enough, he can eventually join the military and make something of himself. Dennis clearly doesn't believe any of that shit, since he is not only the definition of what no pussy does to a motherfucker, but he's also a first-hand victim of that hard work mentality. Oh, if you work hard, you'll get really far. Shut up, cunt. Silas doesn't seem to believe it either, as he seems conflicted between whether he wants to stay or go.
Should I stay or should I go?
The Clash, more like the ass, am I right? You know, he expresses his desire to save his friends, but every time he does, Dennis or his coworkers find a way to bring him back in. This is represented by the wound on his hand that keeps reopening, which only ever happens when he wants to leave but is forced back in. On top of this, one of his coworkers, Webb, is moving up to military training and will be leaving soon, so Silas will need to step up and pick up the slack, and because he respects Dennis, he agrees to this, preventing him from getting out. Now, this is the part that I related to pretty heavily, since it invokes that feeling of being stuck in a dead-end job with aspirations for something more, but something keeps sucking you back in, even though you fucking hate it. Like oh, me, like I want to become a YouTuber, but I can't do that. I have to pay the bills, so I have to work a shitty job that I hate, that I can't get the fuck out of. Dennis is absolutely that boss who likes you way more than you like them, you know what I mean? Like, oh, you're really working hard here. It's like, yeah, sure, I'm just doing basic fucking activities, but sure. And I guess kind of the irony of it is that this job could be the fresh start that Silas always wanted, but it's fucking miserable because his friends aren't there anymore. Like, he technically could leave, but he wouldn't have anywhere else to go, so he just kind of sticks with this. With Silas's arc being all about believing in himself and becoming the person that he really wants to be and finding a new purpose, I think it's very interesting to give him another fresh start that makes him miserable. You know, it kind of makes him wonder if that's what he really needs. I don't know, there's kind of a lot going on with Silas's character to the point where you kind of can't figure out what exactly the point is, but it's got enough going on there that it's like, oh, I kind of fuck with this. But now, the Endlings have a plan. Indira will pretend to turn Iris and Felix into the CRM, and once inside the facility, they will get everybody up to speed and escape out the service entrance with Silas as their getaway driver. This plan goes pretty smoothly at first, until Huck discovers and subsequently tells Leo the truth about Omaha, that their suspicions were all correct, and it was all the CRM's doing to create new test subjects for the facility. Upon learning this, they put a kibosh on the plan, and they all decide to stay and figure out who was benefiting from this and why, with a secondary goal to stop anything else the CRM might be planning in this vein. Okay, so I like the premise of this, it increases the stakes a bit, but the reveal is a little underwhelming, considering that we, the audience, already know all this shit. We know that it was the CRM that took out Omaha. We have known this since day fucking one, and so far, this season has had characters slowly learn new tidbits about it that, sure, are very important to them, but never feel like they have any impact. Because, again, we, the audience, already fucking know this. It's like they're trying to give us a mystery story by drip feeding us all of these big reveals, but it doesn't feel like it matters because we get the gist by this point. First they suspect that the CRM took out Omaha, then Huck confirms it, but now we have to find out how and why they did it, and it's like, okay, sure, that on its own would be fine if it wasn't so fucking repetitive. Like, remember how I said earlier that season 1 felt like it was made to be viewed while half paying attention on your phone? The constant reveals about what the CRM did feel like that. Like, okay, we have a mystery, then they learn the truth, we get confirmation on what the character suspected, but then we have to repeat that explanation for every character that doesn't already know. You know what I mean? Like, I like what this reveal means in terms of stakes, right? It moves the plot forward, it works in that regard. But by God, are they really meandering around this point? So backtracking just slightly, there's a brief moment before they leave the perimeter where Iris gives back the Triceratops horn that Elton gave her. This is obviously meant to have some sort of deeper symbolism, but the show doesn't really do a good job of pushing the viewer in any particular direction as to what that means. In a better show, this would have been a rather impactful moment, since it's calling back to the very beginning and playing with this character dynamic. On paper, it makes sense. The problem is that this is an interaction between two characters who have barely interacted in any meaningful way, and the only interaction that one could derive any meaning from is the shallowest moment of all time. When Elton first finds the horn back in season 1, he tells Silas about what it means to him, where it reminds him of his mother and sister, and that, the wind always wins. That's his whole thing, right? It means a lot to Elton, right? But then in the next scene, he just attaches it to Iris's stick, and then that's kind of the end of it. Like, if you wanted this moment where Iris gives it back to have any weight at all, then it should have been her to ask Elton about it in season 1, not Silas. When she gives it back, she mentions how it made her feel brave and strong. Elton tells her that the horn was just whatever she needed it to be, which sounds like it means something, but it really doesn't. That's pure Scotty Gimpy, dude. Gimple speak aside, Iris didn't seem to even value the horn at all until this moment, so how does she even come to this conclusion? Like, if the horn was just whatever they needed it to be, why was this idea not brought up sooner? Like, I realize that I'm harping on a really small moment, all things considered, but I think it illustrates one of my biggest gripes with this show, which is that they leave a lot on the table when it comes to doing anything deeper than the surface level, especially with symbolism. Iris and Elton could have been a really cool dynamic to explore, especially if they wanted to parallel it with Elton's relationship with Hope. The horn could have been a great symbol to reflect the themes of the show regarding nature and all that, but instead of taking those ideas to an interesting place, the show only hints at them, leaving us with this surface level slop that ultimately means nothing. There is so much potential here that they just do not play around with, and I really fucking don't know why. So, the Endlings have had a change of plans, so naturally, this would be a perfect time to introduce a brand new villain. What, you guys didn't want that? Let me get this straight real quick. You guys are telling me that you didn't want a brand new villain in the middle of the show for no reason? What, are you gay? Kublek tells Huck that she's leaving the facility for a meeting with CRM officials, or some shit like that. And in a post-credits scene, which this show apparently has a lot of that they don't tell you about, we meet her replacement. While conducting her research, Lila is greeted by none other than Jadis, the former leader of the Garbage Fucks and kidnapper of Ricky Dicky Doo-Dog Rhymes, who is here to not only lead the research facility in Kublek's absence, but to investigate any potential corruption within their ranks. She has apparently taken Gabriel's last name Stokes, and is later revealed to have a pre-established friendship with Huck. In fact, it was Huck who trained her when she first joined the CRM, so these two go way back. Within moments, you can tell that she knows that something is up with the Bennetts, with her goal being to maintain order at the research facility by any means necessary. This is our first big connection to the other shows so far, since obviously Jadis is from the main show, and while I think her inclusion makes total sense, she is quite possibly the worst character they could have chosen here. For starters, we the audience obviously know that Jadis was the one who stole Rick, and with World Beyond being advertised as meeting the community who took Rick, it makes sense why many fans were excited by Jadis' inclusion, since she is obviously 1 degree moved from Rick, so maybe there's a chance we can see him. Spoilers, but this does not happen. So Jadis' inclusion was ultimately just bait to trick people into watching a show that they likely did not care about. I think that this ended up poisoning the well, so to speak, since we're taking a show that not many people were watching, but had a small subset of people who liked it, and then we're injecting a character that nobody likes as a teaser for a character that everybody likes, so now a bunch of people who wouldn't have otherwise watched World Beyond would tune in to see Rick and get a whole lot of nothing, thereby making people hate the show for things that are not the show's fault. I hope that made sense to literally anybody, because that was kind of whack. I also think it's kind of fucked up how we had Kublek shaping up to be an interesting and nuanced villain, what with her ties to Huck and her outlook on the CRM's mission, yet she is sidelined completely to make way for a crossover character that has no relevance to anything else and is only there for marketing. And on top of that, and maybe it's just me, but I never liked Jadis. I always thought she was boring, her character's just really not all that interesting to me, and with how different she is on this show compared to the last time we saw her in the main show, there's nothing she's really adding that couldn't have been added by any other character. Like, she is so different in this show that she might as well be a different character, you know what I mean? Like, this didn't have to be Jadis. This could have been fucking Scott from Alexandria, and nothing would really change. Actually, the Scott villain arc would go fucking crazy. Like, he hits the overhead assault rifle move, dude, it's fucking over for everybody. Millions dead. Anyways, Jadis sucks, and she's kind of the main villain now, and not particularly a huge fan of that. Also, stupid thing I noticed, Lila's first new test subject is actually Kublek's soldier from season 1 during like the appliances scene. Ooh, throwback. I'm gay. With Jadis now here and Lila's deal with the CRM revealed, it has basically been confirmed to the audience that the CRM used chemical weapons to take out Omaha and then brought in the herd to cover it up. And if this wasn't painfully obvious to you before, then it certainly is now. Because reminder, we've known about all of this since episode 1, with the only new piece of information being the chemical weapons. And even then, you could probably have guessed that, considering the season 1 scene has like this green gas floating around, so it's like obvious they did something. Huck discovers proof of this after snooping around in her mother's office, finding documents for a Project Votus, which authorizes the use of chemical weapons to create new test subjects for a cure. Leo recognizes these documents from when he first met Lila, realizing that she is working with the CRM and might be complacent in their actions. But now they need to not only confirm their suspicions, but also figure out what the bioweapon even is, so they split up for a new stage of the plan. While the Bennetts keep Lila distracted and try to get her to spill, Felix and Huck sneak into her lab and find out how involved she truly is and get a sample of the poison. This is where we really start exploring Lila's character, and honestly, I don't think she's the worst. During a dinner scene, Iris presses her about how scientists used to test things on animals and how that's not very humane. And while Lila agrees with this, she also believes that sometimes sacrifices like that need to be made in order to save lives. You know, if some rats need to die to save millions of lives, that's a win in her eyes, which is obviously meant to parallel what she's doing with humans to find a cure for other humans. She's using humans as lab rats, that's the point. It's also in service to the whole sacrifice theme that the show has going for it. Iris goes full lib, believing that it's wrong regardless of species, which, while somewhat justifiable, her anger is clearly coming from her hatred of the CRM, not necessarily her beliefs on, you know, medical ethics. Iris Bennett, total lib, loves Blueski. You know what I'm talking about? I promise I won't get political. 2 drinks in. The dinner is quickly adjourned, and this prompts 2 separate conversations. The first is between Hope and Iris, where Iris makes clear her goal of destroying the entire facility. Her exact words are burning the entire facility to the ground. Despite her Morgan Jones all life is precious spiel not too long ago, she seemingly hates everybody at the research facility regardless of who they are. Because if they're cool with what the CRM does, then they are not cool with her. Or something like that. They aren't entirely clear with what her motivation behind this actually is beyond not liking the CRM. Regardless, Hope tries to calm her down and points out that it's the military who are the enemy, not the civilians who don't know about any of these atrocities. I think this is an interesting way to flip their dynamic from season 1. Throughout the first season, Hope was always the one who would act emotionally and jump into situations for selfish reasons, and Iris would always be the rational one who could talk her out of it. This time, the roles are reversed, where Iris is on a warpath, but Hope is the one to try and calm her down. Like I said, Instead, it's the Dark Iris arc. Well, I guess it's the Darker Iris arc, because she's black. Oh, come on, that was funny. If you don't laugh at that, fuck you.
That's gotta be racist. There's no way.
Anyways, this is another instance of the show presenting an idea that works on paper, but then never taking it anywhere. This moment is certainly in service to Hope's character, because it shows how she has now found something to fight for and has gained a bit of perspective. Iris doesn't really get anything out of this. It just reaffirms that she hates the CRM, which we already fucking knew. Neither of them come out of the situation with any new perspective on the situation or of each other. The scene just kinda ends and the episode goes on with whatever other shit is going down. It really begs the question of what the flying fuck even is Iris's arc in this show. We are 75% of the way through this thing and I still can't tell you what she's trying to accomplish aside from the literal. Like, what's the internal here, right? Like, what is going on in her head that is preventing her from being the rational person that she typically is? Because as far as I see it, she feels like a Scott Gimple insert to spout off Gimpleisms that make no fucking sense. Iris felt like such a promising character in episode 1, and hell, even throughout a bit of the first half of the first season, but the rest of the show has done nothing to push her in any direction. So her new warpath mentality that she has in season 2 just doesn't feel natural. Like, I see why she feels this way, given everything that's happened thus far, but it also feels very out of character for her to go this far with it. Like, okay, maybe that's the intention, that she's being uncharacteristically angry, but again, the show never really delves too deep into it. I don't know, maybe I'm missing something, maybe I'm just fucking spazzed, maybe I'm fucking racist, I don't know. But Iris was not doing it for me, and this brief scene is a prime example of why. The other scene to spawn from the awkward dinner is between Lila and Leo. She sits him down and tells him her backstory, where before the apocalypse, she had a husband and daughter. When the shit hit the fan, her daughter was bit and eventually turned, with her husband following suit not long after. She experimented on their walkers in an attempt to fix them, but to no avail. This event has motivated her all these years later to find a cure and save the world, even when she couldn't save her own family. I thought this was a pretty effective backstory, and it certainly made me more invested in her. But two problems here. One is that this is such a generic, par-for-the-course backstory for a Walking Dead character. Like, this is your standard, like, I lost someone, so now I live for them shit that's been done like a million fucking times already. And while this is a little bit more effective since Lila falls into this weird kinda ally, kind of antagonist role, it's not breaking any new ground. Secondly, though, I'm not a huge fan of how they present this information. Lila simply tells Leo this whole story verbally, when I think it would have been way more effective to have actually seen it. Season 1 had a ton of flashbacks, so I think it would have been a lot better if we continued that trend and were actually shown these events to get a better feel for the character. Lila states that she did unspeakable things to her family's walkers in the name of science, but we don't ever really get an idea of how intense it really was because we never see it. They should have flashed back to this and shown Lila with her happy family, then shown the bite, and then the aftermath of her experiments so that we can get a clear line to the present. Like, we get the gist with her just telling the story, but we'd be much more invested if we had been shown an emotionally engaging reason. Now, that's not to say that you also can't do verbal backstory in The Walking Dead. Like, obviously that's worked in the past, like, you know, the We Are the Walking Dead speech. Even some of the other spin-offs have done it to pretty effective degrees. But, like, it's just the fact that, like, this is such a pivotal part of her character that it's just, like, you know, I feel like we should have seen this to really get a feel for it, you know? I think that the lack of things like this really indicated that this season might have had some sort of budgetary restraints. I have no evidence to back this up, so this is just pure speculation, but considering how few locations and few flashbacks there are this season compared to season 1, it's clear that they were trying to make do with what they had. Like, a lot of the show is characters walking through generic hallways or talking in bedrooms and shit like that, where it's clear that they only had a few sets and couldn't really deviate much from them. Once you notice this, the show starts to feel cheap as hell. I think this is also part of why the show feels so CW-ish outside of the writing. You know, the sets feel cheaper, but it's also a lot less intense with the gore and language compared to the other Walking Dead shows. And I don't know if that's necessarily a budget issue, but it was certainly noticeable. Like, I think the worst gore we ever see is back in season 1 where they show Tony's bashed in head for like 2 seconds. Even the standard walkers in this feel a bit compared to the other Walking Dead shows. You know, combine the lack of gore with the lighter tone of season 1, with the teenage POV, with the bare bones writing, and yeah, I see why people say this feels like a CW show. Reminder, this was on AMC, the same network that produced and aired Breaking Bad, Mad Men, and oh yeah, The Walking Dead. It's really weird that this show breathes the same proverbial air as some of the greats, since when you watch it, it doesn't feel like it fits at all. Like, you take a look at AMC's whole lineup of shows that they've had in their entire history, and World Beyond is certainly the odd one out. But I've gone off on a bit of a tangent, I've gotten ahead of myself. Let's get into the final stretch here. Consider this your mid-season whining session. Meanwhile, at the perimeter, Asha and Elton's whole thing also opens up a subplot, in which her family is getting secret medicine from the CRM. At first, we think it's Asha, but it turns out that it's actually Indira, who has a kidney disease and needs constant dialysis, and per a secret agreement with Kublek, the CRM delivers that medicine. Nobody else at the perimeter knows about this, and Asha claims that the reason it's a secret is because if others on the council knew that Indira was sick, they would use it to undermine her authority. Because like, oh, obviously if she's making shady deals, then obviously she's in league with them. This later becomes a point of interest when not only does this secret get out, causing this old white guy here to turn against them, but Iris later communicates her plan to burn the entire facility to the ground, meaning Indira would no longer be able to get her medicine. When Will tries to get in and tell her to, you know, not fucking do that, Indira's son Dev is sniped in the fucking head by the CRM, which breaks their agreement with the perimeter. The CRM is now coming for them, so the plan is to evacuate. So like, this is fine and all, you know, moves the plot along, sure, whatever, but two problems here. One, I don't really care about Dev, or Indira for that matter, so their sorrow means nothing to me. I kinda like Asha, but I wouldn't say I was like emotionally invested, so Dev's death does nothing for me aside from being a surprising little jump scare. Reminds me of Axel, or Marco. Okay, maybe not Marco, but certainly Axel. I think this video has more Axel memes in it than the actual main show video did. That's pretty funny. Which is only 2, but it's weird that it happened twice. Type shit. Secondly, the inner politics of the perimeter aren't really doing it for me, and they honestly don't really end up going anywhere. Like, okay, like there's this whole threat, right, that if Indira's leadership is questioned and the council overthrows her, they'll fall in line with the CRM and lose their autonomy, and that would be bad. Fine premise for a story, you know, there could have been something interesting there, except this never really ends up mattering, since not long after this, old Whitey rats on them and the CRM comes to kill everybody anyways, and Indira is still acting as their leader. So like, why bring this up as a potential threat to her leadership, only for her leadership to not really be affected even when the secret gets out? Like, yeah, old Whitey was pro-CRM from the jump, but if you're gonna do a whole inner politics thing, maybe try and make it a little bit more complex. Like, you know, maybe old Whitey overthrows her first and makes her not the leader anymore, and then he goes to the CRM, and then she's like, alright, well fuck this, I gotta take over or something, you know what I mean? Plus, I'm pretty sure old Whitey is the only council member who expresses any opinion on this whatsoever. I think he's even the only one that gets any lines, so like, why are we kind of making this like a background thing? If you're gonna do a traitor storyline, just fucking do it. Like, it felt like they were trying to do it, planted the seeds for it, and then just kind of abandoned it at the last minute. The revelation that Indira's medicine was through an agreement with Kublek is also something to note here, because now we're actually planting the seeds that she wasn't actually all that bad. Now that Jadis is here, we need to make her more villainous than Kublek, and to do so, they make it clear that Kublek has a conscience, while Jadis does not. This was always somewhat the case, for example, that scene of her crying over Omaha back in season 1, but it was also clear that she did not regret her actions, viewing them as a necessary evil. The deal with Indira shows that she is willing to break protocols if it's something that she feels is right, while Jadis's unwillingness to abide by these off-the-books agreements shows that she is nothing like her, and is, in fact, worse. I think there is something to that, but they don't do a very good job at it since, again, I thought Kublek was way more interesting when she was an evil for the greater good type of figure. Including this compassionate moment does add a level of complexity to her, but also feels like they're trying to tone her villainy down a bit so that Jadis could look like the bigger villain. Also, semi-related here, but Jadis mentions the main show. You remember the main show, right, guys? You guys remember the Garbage People and the Saviors and Ricky Dicky Doodah Grimes? Please watch our show.
Please clap.
Meanwhile, we further explore the Silas and Dennis dynamic. After the Bennett's change of plans, Silas is caught at the facility and questioned by Jadis, which, may I point out, is really fucking weird. Like, literally, she almost immediately starts talking about his feet, and it's like, what the fuck is happening?
Look at those clompers. You could skip through a rock pile with those.
Jesus, oh my god. You got the foot fetish, I got a foot fetish, goddamn. Jokes aside though, Jadis points out how she thinks that Silas could make a good soldier, which seemingly emphasizes this part of Silas's arc where everybody is pushing him into a direction to, quote, do something with his life when he just wants to be with his friends. This motif is further emphasized when Dennis comes in to bail him out, and unlike their earlier interactions, we actually have a bit of context for why Dennis even cares about Silas at all. By this point, we've learned that Dennis and Huck are together, aka Huckin, and this relationship apparently came about when Dennis did something fucked when he was a soldier, and Huck covered for him. Regardless, Dennis lives somewhat of a disgraced life, where he used to do what he viewed as a noble job, helping the cause and whatnot, but is now relegated to the CRM's equivalent of a garbage man, aka the shittiest job that nobody wants to do. I think it's pretty clear to see the parallels here. Silas and Dennis are both not where they want to be in life, so Dennis constantly pushes Silas to make something of his life to not end up like him. This is a fine premise, but I think it would have worked a lot better if we had been given any reason to give a flying fuck about Dennis. I propose another flashback, this time showing why Dennis changed his outlook on his time as a soldier and how he became so jaded. Or maybe a flashback to whatever he did as a soldier that got him, put to garbage duty, which would also make his relationship with Huck a lot more believable. Dennis is probably the worst example of a character in this show that has an interesting concept behind him that is completely neutered by the audience not giving a shit. He's a lot like Iris in this sense, but at least Iris has the benefit of being a main character who's been around from the start, so the audience at least has a reason to care about her, even if it is a really bad reason. Like, I didn't give a fuck about Dennis outside of his relationships with Huck and Silas, which are more in service to their characters than his. He's more of a plot device than a character, honestly, and even his mentorship of Silas, a character that I did give a fuck about, didn't really save him for me. Back at the fentanyl... Why did I read that as fentanyl? Back at the facility, Huck and Felix discover a massive stash of some unknown poison and are able to steal a sample. Leo determines that it's chlorine gas, which is important because now they know how they did it, how much they have, and that they are definitely planning on doing it again, with Huck and subsequently Percy revealing that the CRM is planning on using it on Portland. Oh, and by the way, there's this whole revenge subplot where Percy wants to kill Huck to avenge Tony, and it's super fucking annoying. He tries to kill her back at the perimeter, but fails. He joins Felix and Iris on their way to the facility in order to get close to her, and he tries again during this arc by apparently waiting in her apartment in the dark. What are you, a fucking Bond villain?
¿Dónde está la biblioteca, Pedro?
Why?
We're opening a new Globo gym in Mexico City. I've been boning up on my Spanish.
Now, compare this to something like Maggie and Negan, and it just feels really shallow, which is saying something because those two are already kind of a one-trick pony. Every scene is the same fucking thing. It's like, oh, she's gonna pay for what she did, while Huck's like, listen, kid, I probably deserve it, but we got bigger fish to fry. That's like a pretty decent Hug impression, I'm not gonna lie. On top of that, the show seemingly has a giving a fuck problem, because I'm struggling to give a fuck about Percy too. He was never the most interesting character to begin with, but he did serve as something of a foil for the other kids, since he is somebody their age who has a completely different outlook on the world than them due to surviving in the wild for so long. Now that everybody else is on the same page as him, nothing about him really stands out anymore, so his story is relegated to generic revenge, and it's kinda lame. He's definitely a likable character, he just doesn't fucking do anything worth caring about, so why even bother? He's likable, but I don't give a shit. Does that make sense? Anyways, Team Endling is now fully aware of the CRM's plans and are working to stop them. But now, Jadis finds out that they stole a vial of the poison, which kind of fucks the entire plan, because now she won't let Leo out of her sight. She suspects that the Bennetts have it, which they do, so she takes Leo in for questioning. Meanwhile, the girls plead with Lila to get her to take the fall so that their dad can get off scot-free. So, you guys remember how I thought Lila's backstory did a pretty good job at humanizing her? Well, this kind of completely undoes all of that, since in her conversation with the girls, she reveals that she was the one that asked the CRM for new test subjects, which was what prompted them to take out Omaha, and she seemingly takes zero issue with this so long as she can achieve her goal. I get what they're trying to do here, right? They're trying to give the scientist perspective on the genocides, and so far we've only gotten the military rationale. And since we know Lila's backstory, we can understand why she'd be involved to this level. We spend all this time trying to make her sympathetic, understanding her motivations, and making the audience think she can be reasoned with, but the subversion is that she's already in way too deep. I guess that works, but it's kinda nothing we didn't already know about her. Yeah, she will go to great lengths to achieve a cure. We have known this since we met her, and we're just now seeing the extent of it, which I guess is interesting, but it just felt like another instance of the show dragging shit out. I mean, it's fine, but we get the idea, you know? I think the only difference now is that now the girls are aware of it. That's kind of the only difference. To make matters even worse, Lila rats on Leo and tells Jadis everything about the missing vial, but tries to strike a deal to have him help on the project instead of facing punishment. In response to this, Leo learns the truth about Project Votus, which is that it studies the reanimation process on live test subjects to better understand how to prevent it. I kinda like that Lila implicates Leo into the project against his will in an attempt to save him, because as much as she has been complacent in the CRM's genocide, she does seem to genuinely value family. I mean, like, she's doing all of this so that what happened to her husband and daughter doesn't happen to anybody else, so it makes sense that this core motivation is what causes her to try and save Leo, showing that even though she was involved in a genocide, it comes from an emotional place, which humanizes her compared to the CRM who did it for pure cold-hearted logistics. Unfortunately for her, though, all of Lila's efforts were in vain, as almost immediately after striking this deal with Jadis, she gets fucking killed. Jadis views her as expendable, and with the Bennetts aware of the details of the project, she thinks that they'll be able to make much better progress. Unlike Lila, Leo has a family, which makes him a lot easier to control. At the end of the day, I'm kind of unsure how to feel about Lila. She was one of the primary reasons that Omaha and the campus colony were wiped out and is responsible for the deaths of thousands, which is pretty unforgivable. But on the other hand, she didn't know that her request for test subject would have caused such a genocide, and really just wanted to honor her fallen family and protect her new one. It's a little muddy, like every other character arc in this show, but I can't say I didn't feel a little bit bad for her in the end. Like, she definitely didn't deserve to go off scot-free, but she also didn't deserve to have such a gruesome death. I think this is honestly the only time World Beyond has presented this level of moral complexity on par with the other Walking Dead shows, and it's kind of a shame they didn't do this with, like, you know, a main fucking cast member. But sure, Lila, one of the few actual genuinely nuanced characters in this show. Low-key kind of bars. So now that Team Endling really knows everything they now have a new plan. Instead of just getting themselves out, the plan is to get all of these scientists to leave with them, and then destroy the facility and the chlorine so that they can't use it against Portland. Using the scientists as leverage is actually a pretty good idea. Since they are literally the only reason the facility even exists, the CRM would obviously not want them to die, so escaping with them would ensure their own safety. With the scientists on board, it's on to the final stretch. The Endlings are going through with their plan while the perimeter group prepares to evacuate. But of course, things do not go so smoothly, because not only does Jadis almost immediately catch on to what the Bennetts are up to, causing her to accelerate her own plan, but old Whitey has spilled the beans about everything that's gone down at the perimeter. In response, Jadis calls an evacuation drill on the facility in order to suss out anybody on the Bennett side, and orders her soldiers to execute everybody at the perimeter. What I like about this twist is that it really goes to show how smart these characters truly are. Jadis really thinks that she has the upper hand here, and many of her choices indicate that she's a pretty good strategist. But the Bennetts purposefully made their plan more complicated than it needs to be in order to throw her off. They knew that she would lock the facility down, so they took advantage of that in order to buy time, and you know, shit like that. This was also part of what made Leo one of my favorite characters by this point, because not only does it display that he is super smart in more things than just science, but he's also not afraid to get down and dirty and handle the real shit. He is simultaneously the orchestrator of this whole thing, the guy leading the charge, is on the front lines making the deals, and he even gets to see some action. Like, honestly, if the whole show was about this guy, I would be completely down. Like, he's kind of the fucking goat. Meanwhile, Elton, Asha, and the rest of the perimeter are held at gunpoint by the CRM, but luckily, Will, Silas, and Dennis come in at the last minute to save the day. This was very Fear-esque, and I do not mean that in a good way. It really brings to mind all the times that Morgan would talk his way out of unwinnable situations, or even the times on the main show where characters are saved at the last minute by what amounts to a coincidence. Like, I get that there would be no tension if shit like this didn't happen at the last minute, but like, come on, dude, are we serious? Can we be dead ass? Plus, nobody dies here, and I think the fact that so few people were able to take out an entire trained military platoon is a little bit fucking crazy. Well, I say nobody dies, but Dennis does get shot and is likely going to die, which is worth mentioning for when we get to the finale, but I'm not counting this as a casualty since he's still alive at this point. Anyways, the show has really not done a great job at displaying how scary the CRM is, which in fairness isn't really their fault since Fear also kind of royally fucked this, but my point is, these guys don't feel threatening anymore. Like, if Iris killing one of these guys in the dead of night with very little combat experience wasn't enough, then this should certainly convince you that they're fucking useless. I think the most egregious example, though, is that part of the Endlings' plan is to distract the CRM with the herd so that their manpower is spread thin, which Elton and Silas are able to do shortly after the perimeter incident. This somehow fucking works, which makes no fucking sense because this is the same military that is not only shown and described as tracking and redirecting herds, but literally used one on Omaha. The fact that they not only couldn't see this coming and were unable to stop it is absolutely absurd, as is the fact that they didn't kill a single unarmed person and got their asses beaten so badly even with the numbers advantage. Like, I could forgive on the main show that they didn't see a herd coming when it was pretty obvious because it's like, alright, depending on the context, it's like, alright, they're kind of new at this, maybe they're not exactly as cognizant of the idea of herds yet, right? But like, the CRM, guys have fucking helicopters and can see the shit coming, it's like, alright, it's a little hard to believe. The CRM soldiers are honestly no different from walkers at this point. They apparently aren't very threatening one-on-one. It's their numbers that make them difficult. And apparently, not even that's the case, since they get beaten so frequently frequently when they so vastly outnumber our main characters. On top of all of that, this scene made me realize something. Elton is barely fucking in this season, and when he is, he doesn't really do shit. The most plot relevance he gets is in relation to the whole subplot about Indira's secret, so most of his screen time is character building with Asha. Like I've mentioned, the two bond over their views on the dead and existentialism and shit like that, and that comes to a head during this scene where the CRM is about to execute them. Thinking that they're both about to die, Elton takes her hand and tells her that everything is gonna be okay, upon which Silas and company come in for the save. This is super fucking generic, and like, dude, the fucking CGI leaf floating dramatically in slow motion was pure unadulterated gimbal. Like, according to the credits, he didn't write or direct this episode, but like, I just know it was him. You know? It has the Gimple vibe, you know? Like, I get it, right? You know, Elton's whole thing is that the wind always wins, nature always wins, you know, that type beat. And this is meant to be his way of finding comfort in his mother's philosophy, right? It works, but Elton has been so in the background for most of the season that I don't think this really worked the way that it was intended to. Granted, I still like Elton, but this is absolutely another example of the show trying to express themes that even the writers don't fully understand.
And the ants come at me, it'll take 10,000, 100,000 of them to take me down. So that's how minuscule you are to my size, right? My stature of intelligence, character, body, and reverence in the world.
Also, complete tangent, but I just thought of this. Art is a very big motif throughout World Beyond. Iris wants to be an artist. Jadis used to be an artist. And the Perimeter is a whole colony of artists. And I feel like they could have done something interesting with that. Like, okay, maybe the reason that Jadis doesn't like Indira is because she's an idealist and expresses that through her art, i.e. the globe sculpture outside the facility. While Jadis has forsaken that kind of thinking, and therefore her artistry, in favor of practicality. Or perhaps Jadis discovers Iris's art somewhere and determines that it has something to do with the plan due to also having the mind of an artist. I don't know. I think there's something there. Like, I'm not gonna hold this against the show, but the fact that I'm finding easy connections that they didn't make is kind of saying something. I don't know what that something is, but it's saying something, I'm pretty sure. So far, the Bennett's plan has been going pretty smoothly, until they experienced their first hiccup. Hope and Felix head to Lila's lab to destroy the chlorine, but come to find out that it's all gone, meaning that Jadis caught on and decided to move it somewhere else. How the fuck they did that in less than a day is beyond me. It's world beyond me. Why would you fucking say that? Why would you fucking put that in the video, you fucking idiot? Anyways, Jadis just took the chlorine gas and pushed it somewhere else. And on top of that, has ordered her soldiers to kill the scientists if they need to, meaning that the Endlings no longer have the leverage that they think that they have. Her exact words are,
"Eliminate some to traumatize the many."
Which, not gonna lie, goes pretty hard. Shame they gave that bar to fucking Jadis.
Let's plant the charges and get out of here. Fuck this place.
Whoa guys, Hope said the F word. Fuck Batman. Damn, it's crazy how that's only the second F-bomb that's been dropped in this show.
You a faggot?
Even though things didn't go quite according to plan, the Endlings still have one piece of leverage. Throughout the season, CRM characters have been constantly name-dropping a supposedly very important character named General Major Beale. While he does not appear in the show, although he does show up in The Ones Who Live, he is implied to be the head honcho of the entire CRM who oversees everything. This guy's a big deal, and if he's involved, then it must be something big. Well, I guess we already know that it's something big because it's Project Votus, but my point is he is involved, he knows, he's the one okaying all this shit. Well, as it turns out, Hope's friend Mason's last name is Beale. He is the son of the Major General, which means that if they want their way, they can use him as leverage. This all culminates in a standoff outside the facility, with Felix, Hope, Iris, and Percy using Mason to negotiate their escape against Jadis and Huck. They have a whole discussion about all the bad shit the CRM's done. We repeat the whole thing about Omaha and Portland being a strain on resources, blah blah blah. We've done this a million times already. And just for that, I'm gonna nitpick something. Okay, so these fuckers are like, you know, clearly within earshot of each other, right? But instead they choose to talk over the walkies on their shoulders. And it's like, guys, we're in a borderline active war zone. You can strain your vocal cords a little bit, you know what I mean? Like, what the fuck are we doing? Anyways, the herd proved to be a bit of a double-edged sword, as the dead are quickly approaching during this negotiation, meaning that someone has to make a move, and quick. The first to do so ends up being Mason, who spazzes and tries to run. Percy goes after him, causing Huck to turn on Jadis in an attempt to help him, but he ends up getting shot in the fucking head. And I'm pretty sure we never actually see who shoots him. I think it's implied that it was one of these snipers, and maybe I'm missing something, but I literally don't even remember seeing him get shot. Like, he tackles Fucko to the ground, and then in the next shot, there's just a hole in his head. It's kind of fucking insane if they actually didn't show that, but I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and say I probably just blinked too slowly. Oh, update by the way, I didn't miss anything. The scene is actually just edited like that. I guess he went out the way he went in. He was introduced with no proper introduction shot. He just, existed. He just started existing as if we were already introduced to him. And then, he dies and we don't even see the bullet hole enter his head. You know what I mean? Real competent, guys. Hope attempts to kill Mason in revenge, finally seeing that he's in way too deep with the CRM's propaganda. However, Iris stops her, claiming that this isn't who she is. This causes Hope to remember the day the sky fell, and she begrudgingly agrees. While very preachy and gay, I like how it re-emphasizes something about these two that was hinted at the end of Season 1, but was kind of put on the back burner for 2, which is that Hope and Iris are a package deal. They have complementary personalities and keep each other from going too far and losing themselves. That being said, I feel like these roles should have been switched in this moment. With Iris having been on the Dark Iris arc for most of the season, it would have made way more sense for her to be the one to want revenge, not Hope. She has constantly expressed her desire to destroy the CRM and anybody who agrees with them, and with Mason basically causing Percy's death, I'd say that it makes an insane amount of sense for her to pull the gun on him and for Hope to talk him down, especially since Hope has become a lot wiser. And of course, Hope and Mason kind of had a thing going on, so she would probably be more likely to want to spare him, even if she does know that he's a fucking nepo baby. Instead, Iris is the one to talk Hope down, which feels like a complete 180. Iris has been given no reason to think that forgiveness is now a viable option, so why does she stop now? Because Percy is dead? That sounds to me like just an additional reason to want more revenge. I don't know, this is just further proof to me that Iris is a Scott Gimple insert. Meanwhile, Silas and Elton have just finished leading the herd to the facility. This does a pretty good job at displaying how quickly they've adapted to the apocalypse in such a short time. A few weeks ago, these two couldn't even look at a walker, but now they're leading an army of thousands of them. Kind of an insane glow up. Before they head back, they decide to raid the facility's infirmary to get medicine for Dennis and Indira. In the process, Silas comes across his old decontamination co-worker, Webb, who is now a cadet in the CRM. He quickly figures out that Silas is with the rebels and tries to have him arrested. This is a great way of showing how deep the CRM indoctrination can go. We have this young guy who has nothing in life doing a shit-ass job just to get a chance at joining the military, and once he does, he throws all of his old friendships out the window. He doesn't give a fuck that he knows Silas, he sees him as the enemy that the CRM told him that he was. This is a cool idea, but much like a lot of things in the show, it feels extremely shallow. I think the biggest problem with this is that Silas only knew Webb for like a week tops. And that's exaggerating. They were never really shown to be actual friends, and I think the fact that their relationship basically amounts to old co-workers really cheapens what this scene was obviously going for. Like, if these two had had a genuine friendship earlier in the show, this scene would work a lot better, kind of like the Rick and Morales scene from the main show, for example. But no, they don't do anything like that, and it just feels like fucking padding. By the way, can I mention how fucking silly their escape is? So Elton and Silas escape the facility by going inside of Indira's globe statue that she made for the facility, and they just start rolling around in it like a fucking hamster ball. It's so fucking comical, dude. That's pure fucking Gimple right there. Scotty Gimpy's had his big old fingies all up in that, you know what I'm saying? With the escape plan in full force, the Endlings split off from the rest of the group to keep the CRM off of their trail. In the process, the 4 original Endlings finally reunite, and honestly, I really like this scene. This is the first time that Hope and Elton have interacted since she confessed about what she did to his mother. The two hug it out, with Elton seemingly forgiving her for what she did. This is seemingly more for her than it is for the audience though, since if you recall, Elton already forgave Hope for this almost immediately after she told him. While this moment is nice and cathartic after the two narrowly avoiding each other, it is a little bit Like, it doesn't feel like it has the punch it should have, even though it's kind of like, alright, I like the vibe, you know? After this, Iris tells the others what happened to Percy, and the 4 all share a big group hug before realizing that now they're on their own, and the CRM currently has the upper hand. They think it's all Jover, but luckily for them, Huck finds out where the chlorine is and lets the kids know, giving them the will to fight and finish this whole thing, which leads us into the series finale. Finish the fight. I'm John Halo.
Galo 3.
The series finale, titled The Last Light, opens with a flashback to Monument Day, when the Endlings leave campus for the very first time. They promise to have each other's backs, and Elton tells them to avoid walkers if they see them. This is then juxtaposed by cutting back to the present, where these four are killing walkers like it's absolutely nothing, showing how far they've come in just 2 months. This is a fine opening scene. Spoilers, it's kind of actually a bookend for the episode, but this would have been a great scene, I think, to have included in season 1. When it was relevant. One of my criticisms of the premiere is that they didn't do a good enough job at making us believe that these kids are all friends, and they are seemingly playing catch up with this 20 episodes later, otherwise known as the end of the fucking show. In fairness, that is what everything in between is supposed to be, but I think it's just a little bit ironic that they're still doing like character building, trying to force this friendship even in the finale. It's pretty funny. But I guess forget the Endlings being together, because upon meeting up with Huck, Silas decides that he's going to stay with her and Dennis. The couple plan to make it to Philly and tell everybody what's going on, and he wants to go with them because Dennis has done right by him. So much for this wholesome reunion and ending the show with the characters we started with. I don't know, maybe it's me, but personally, I'd have preferred that Silas at least try to stay with his friends, since they're like, you know, the whole reason that he wanted to ditch janitor duty to begin with. And again, maybe it's just me, but Silas seems uncharacteristically wise in this episode. Like, he was always so unsure and apprehensive about literally everything, but now he is making definitive decisions and spouting off pseudo-intellectual quotes. You can tell Scott Gimpy's had his big fat fingies all up in this episode, and it really shows with Silas. I mean, like, maybe it's the point that he's like, okay, he's all apprehensive and unsure about making decisions the entire show, so now he's making a definitive decision, but it's like, that was never really the crux of his character. This would have been fine had his character development actually led him to this point, but it kinda doesn't. Like, as much as I appreciated his character, he is ultimately a bit stagnant, so it comes off as a bit weird to have him just developed suddenly in the finale. Like, I think I like the idea of his arc more than I like the actual execution of it. You know? Anyways, the Endlings say goodbye to Silas, and unlike their last goodbye scene, they end this one on pretty good terms. Silas is happy that he finally has friends who accept him for who he is, and that don't care about his past. Elton believes that they will meet again someday, and honestly, that simple line just kind of hits, man. Like, this scene reminds me of like when you go off to college and you say goodbye to all your high school friends without realizing that it's going to be your last time meeting. I don't know. I'm just a sucker for goodbye scenes like this. I don't know what it is. Listen, you can make fun of it, you can criticize it all you want. I don't know. It got me somehow. I didn't cry because I'm not a pussy. I'm not a pussy bitch, but you know. Huck and Silas rig up some explosive to blow up the chlorine, but there's just one problem. Because of the CRM jamming radio signals in the area, a remote detonator is not going to work, meaning that somebody has to stay behind and detonate them manually. Huck offers to be the one to do it, sending Dennis and Silas ahead. After this, Jada shows up and the two fight. This is not really all that interesting, but it is the only time that she mentions Ricky Dicky Doodah Rhymes. Oh, but not by name, because why the flying fuck would we do that, right? Now, if you recall from the main show, Jadis would constantly go off about A's and B's, and here we get an explanation for what that means. She explains that an A is a person who can be used as a test subject, while a B is somebody who can be useful to the community, with Jadis trading Rick's life as a B in order to get into the CRM to begin with. She mentions that people are a resource, which is a line from Negan. The two fight some more, and Jadis stabs Huck, probably fatally, and leaves her to die. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with this scene, but the fact that this was the new information about Rick that the episode was advertised as having is so unbelievably underwhelming that I think only Scott Gimple couldn't have written it. This man has never heard the term excitement in his entire life. Like, if you wanted to advertise this as being like, oh, we get our first breadcrumb for where Rick is, just have Rick waking up in a coma or something to mirror the fucking main show in like a post-credit scene or something. I don't know. Like, if you're gonna promise Rick, at least deliver that, because this isn't delivering Rick. This is clickbait. This ultimately amounts to clickbait.
Where's Rick?
And I might be remembering this wrong, but I'm pretty sure the whole A's and B's thing is completely contradicted in The Ones Who Live, but I guess I'll find out when I rewatch that show, because I don't actually remember. Subscribe now to see the Ones Who Live video when it comes out. Also, tangentially related to this, but there's a lot of stick warfare in this episode for some reason. You know, you got Huck versus Jadis fighting with sticks. You got Felix dual-wielding two of the CRM spears like he's fucking Darth Maul. Like, honestly, that's kind of sick as fuck. Like, I can't even complain about the lack of character growth for him. him because, like, this entire fight is just cool as hell. Felix might low-key be the GOAT. He might be my static character GOAT, low-key. Anyways, though, despite knowing that she's going to die, Huck reveals that she has one more trick up her sleeve. It turned out that she rigged up her father's watch as a timer to set off the C4, which scares the fuck out of Jadis and her soldiers, so they get the fuck out of there. For context, this watch, which once belonged to Huck's father, who we never meet, was given to her by her mother back in season 1, telling her that it'll remind her to never be late. Using that watch to blow up the gas, and subsequently herself, represents something. It seems like the show really wants to add symbolism to the watch, but it also doesn't seem like they really knew what they wanted it to symbolize. It's basically the Triceratops horn again, where they wanted this to be like a big symbol in the narrative, but didn't actually know what the fuck they wanted it to mean. I could see the watch working in a few ways. You know, the watch could represent the time that Huck stays separated from the people that she loves. No, it originally belonged to her father, who clearly isn't in the picture anymore. Her mother tells her to never be late when she gives it to her. Huck's whole mission in Omaha was predicated on going deep undercover and living an entirely different life for an extended period of time, during which she is unable to be with her husband. She spends so much time away from people that she has lost herself several times over. She even has a line where she mentions that it's the watch that brought her and her mother back together, which seems to reinforce this idea. But being with the Endlings changed her yet again, this time for the better, and she has seemingly learned to appreciate the time spent with others. None of that is particularly obvious though. That's mostly just me spitballing, with the watch not really being that central of a thing like the horn was. So I really don't know how hard they were trying to go with this. Dennis and Silas make it to safety for the time being. However, upon seeing the gas cloud and knowing that his wife is dead, Dennis completely gives up. He can tell that Huck only sent them ahead so that they wouldn't see her die, and Dennis knows that his bullet wound is probably just gonna kill him anyways. The CRM is now closing in to arrest them. However, he still owes it to Silas, so to clear his name, he orders Silas to kill him and tell the soldiers that he was just being forced to help them against his will. Dennis reminds him that you're not one of them, and Silas pulls the trigger and is subsequently taken into custody. Personally, I think this is a great bookend for Silas's character. If you recall, the thing that sets off his entire character arc is that he killed his own father, albeit accidentally, and is looking to get a fresh start. Fast forward to now, where in order to get another fresh start, he is forced to kill Dennis, who, while not his father, certainly had a very parental role in his life. His biological father was an abusive asshole, and he killed him out of rage, but now he has a father figure who genuinely wants the best for him, who he has to kill out of mercy. It also solidifies Dennis as an incredibly tragic character. He is a disgraced military guy who watches over kids all day on walker duty, and the only positive thing he has in his life is his wife, who he never gets to see. This guy's life fucking sucks, and he knows it. Unfortunately for him, though, the show has done nothing to make me give a shit about him, so his death meant kind of nothing to me. Obviously, it's very important for Silas's character, and that works for the most part, but I felt absolutely nothing watching this dude fucking perish. The other three Endlings are in the process of escaping the cloud of chlorine coming their way, and luckily they come across Indira and Asha, who can take them to the others. However, a walker sneaks up on Hope, and at the last second, Elton is able to save her at the cost of his own arm. He got bit, and they chopped that bitch off screen. I think they were trying to do something thematic with this, but much like a lot of the symbolism in this show, it's a little murky. Throughout the show, Elton has been wearing a corduroy suit, which as we see a few times, is actually bite-proof. He clearly relies on this thing, to the point where when Percy asks to take it so he can pretend to be him, Elton is a little reluctant to do so. Ever since then though, he's been facing the world without that layer of protection. Raw-dogging the apocalypse, if you will. But that layer of protection is more than just literal. His jacket represents how he is still holding on to the past to remain sane. It's a proverbial safety blanket, and now that he doesn't have it, he has to face the world for what it truly is, which was his goal from the very beginning. The world is an unforgiving place, so he pays a price to truly understand this.
So that explains the drip.
In a similar vein, it also shows how he's grown to forgive Hope for what she did, even though he already did that, but you get the idea. He saves the life of the person who killed his mother at the expense of his own arm, because at the end of the day, that's just the kind of person that Elton is and who his mother taught him to be. He ironically honors his mother's memory by saving her killer. There is definitely something to this for sure, though considering how the writers have handled their more obvious narrative symbols in the show, it's kind of hard to tell how much of this was intentional. That being said, I think my interpretation's pretty good, and Elton might low-key be the GOAT. But now, the battle is over. The chlorine has been destroyed, the Endlings are hiding away in an underground mall so that the CRM can't find them from the air, and Portland is currently safe. But this begs the question, where do we go from here? Well, firstly, the scientists, including Hope and Leo, decide to stay where they're at and continue their research. They might not have believed in the CRM, but they still believe in finding a cure, hoping to help the rest of the world. And Felix and Will stick around as their security. And they get a dog. What the dog doing? other. Secondly, the remaining members of Indira's group plan to make the trip to Portland and warn them about what the CRM did. Despite the Bennett family now being back together, Iris wants to go with them, believing that it's where she's needed right now. Much like with Silas and Elton, they're trying to do some more bookend parallels here. When we first met Iris, she knew what her true calling was. She was an artist, but due to the position that she was in, she put that aside and tried to become more like her father, and just generally became an overachiever. She was not living her own life, something that she directly points out in the first episode. Now, after all she's done and experienced, she has a clear vision of what she feels she needs to do, except this time, she actually wants to do it. She believes that warning Portland is important, so she makes that her goal and won't let anybody stop her. You know, the start and end to her arc works, but nothing in between really has anything to do with it. She definitely had the weakest arc of the 4 main endlings, and her character in general is just really inconsistent and boring. But I've already complained about that, so I won't repeat myself. But hey, maybe I'm missing something. Maybe the hardcore Iris stans out there can change my mind. Maybe Iris Bennett has fucking shooters, dude. You never know. The Bennett sisters say their goodbyes, which I think was an interesting way to bring them full circle. The two are described as inseparable and are shown to have complementary personalities that lift each other up, like I've been fucking bringing up the entire video. The two separating at the end of the series shows that even though they are still sisters and still love each other, that they don't need each other to be complete people anymore. They now have their own respective goals in life that just so happen to bring them in different directions, but now they are capable of facing them on their own.
All this, it didn't change us. It just showed us that who we are is who we were.
Another Gimple ass bar, but like honestly, low key, that's kind of heat a little bit. Listen, I make fun of Scott Gimple a lot, but when he gets in his bag with his pseudo intellectualism, it kind of hits sometimes. It is gay, but it is kind of bars. Also, I really like the middle finger callback here. It's a nice little touch. Meanwhile, Jadis interrogates Silas, who tells her the cover story that Dennis gave him. She can tell that this is bullshit, but instead of punishing him for it, she lets him join the military as her own special student. Despite doing everything to get back to his friends and avoid the CRM, Silas winds up becoming another soldier, just like Dennis told him he could be. I cannot say that I was the biggest fan of this, since Silas obviously doesn't want to do any of this, and hell, even Dennis knew that he didn't want this. He specifically avoided sticking around at Decontamination because he didn't want to become a soldier and wants to be with his friends. He was finally able to realize himself by the end, but putting him in with the CRM felt almost like a punishment. And I mean, maybe that's the idea. Maybe Jadis sees that like, oh, he doesn't want any of this, so let's make him do this as his punishment, and then indoctrinate him in the process, you know what I mean? You know, all the other characters get relatively happy endings, at least as far as Walking Dead standards go. So why does the guy who has arguably suffered the most just get to suffer more? It also kind of conflicts with Dennis's final words of, "You're not one of them," since Silas now is one of them, and seemingly has no qualms with it. Like, if Silas is going deep cover by joining the military to take them down from the inside or something, then 1, why not make that a lot more obvious, and 2, why do this in the very last episode where the writers knew that we would never see the resolution to this? Like, okay, like maybe if Silas became a soldier a little bit earlier, and then he kind of started doing like the take him down from the inside thing, like, you know, maybe halfway through season 2 or something, that would have worked, but like this, it just kind of tagging it on at the very end doesn't really work to me. Silas by far has the worst ending of the bunch, because it is so out of left field, and it feels like the writers are going in 2 different directions with it. Like, I wouldn't go as far as to say that this is bad, it's just really fucking weird. You know? After this, we pick up with Kublek, seemingly in Philly, where she is mourning the loss of her daughter. After reflecting on her actions, she is now very regretful of them. She speaks with Jadis and tells her that after all that's happened, she believes that a better future might not be possible. This flies in the face of what she used to preach, which is that the heinous shit that they do is necessary to create such a better world. She seems to still agree with this, but is no longer willing to create a better world if heinous shit is the solution. Jadis disagrees with this, so she has her arrested for treason, not because she actually did anything illegal, but so the CRM has somebody to blame for what happened at the facility. I like that we get some level of redemption for Kublek, since I think that's where her relationship with Huck was leading before they derailed it for Jadis. As early as season 1, she has been shown feeling immense guilt over her actions and acknowledging that the things that she and the CRM do are unforgivable, so the seeds were always there for her to see the error of her ways and turn against the CRM. However, we never actually get to see this because they wrote her out of the story for no good reason. She certainly faces the consequences consequences of her actions, but it feels more sad than anything because the consequences aren't what changes her. Rather, her change of heart comes from Huck's death, which is arguably the real big consequence of her actions, and that alone does feel like enough suffering for her. Kublek was one of the most interesting characters in the whole show, if I'm being completely honest, and it's kind of fucked up that they treated her arc this way. You know, they cut it halfway through and then give her a haphazard ending. I mean, I guess that's kind of par for the fucking course for the show at this point, but you know, man, what the fuck, dude, you know what I'm saying? The show ends on a montage showing everybody's fates, with Hope staying in New York with the other scientists to work on a cure, Elton and Iris taking Indira's people to warn Portland, and Silas joining the CRM military. Narrating this montage is Elton, who has a whole monologue about life. He explains how we're not the end, and we're not the beginning, but the here and the now. Now, there's a lot that sucks about the world, but there's also a lot to live for. We need to live in the moment in order to make the most out of life, because there's no way to know what's going to happen next. The show ends by bringing us back to that flashback right before the Endlings leave the campus for the first time. Elton says, "Time to find out who we really are," opens the door, and the show fades into white. Honestly, I didn't think this was a horrible way to end the show. It's a nice scene overall that reaffirms one of the core themes of the series, that life is fragile, and that's why it's worth living. I remember watching this when it first aired and thought that it was a suck-ass ending that left everything all open-ended, which it kind of is, but upon revisiting it and despite my endless bitching, I actually liked most of the ending. While I wasn't a huge fan of the whole developing a cure thing, more on that in a moment, I like how everybody ends up where they do, even though I have a lot of very harsh criticisms of it. You know, Silas started the show as purposeless and afraid of the world and other people, but ended up making a sacrifice for the sake of his friends and finding a purpose in something he doesn't want to do. I still think it's weird and confusing that they made him a soldier, but it does give him a purpose that he did not have before. Elton began as an existentialist dork who wasn't prepared to get down and dirty, but he ends up becoming a hero who has accepted the world for what it truly is. Iris spends the entire show being told that she is a leader, and in the end is able to actually become that, somehow. Still don't know how, but she does. And most importantly, Hope had zero direction or aspirations, but through her journey saw the importance of using her gift to help the world, and now she's doing that on her own terms. The characters undeniably have a great deal of character development, so if that was what you watched the show for, which I would assume that it is, then you're definitely gonna get something out of this. You're not gonna get the most, well-written arcs out there, but they have a clear beginning, clear end. The middle is a little but they're functional arcs, I would say. However, this ending also reaffirms my biggest fear with the original concept behind World Beyond. It is a small-stake show with ideas that are way too big for their own good. Like, okay, right, like we can do Stand By Me with zombies, you know, that's fine, right, sure. But then in season 2, it becomes like a fucking Hunger Games, young adult novel type beat where they're taking down an oppressive government, and it's like, dude, we lost the plot somewhere along the way here. The show is at its best when it is deconstructing these characters, but by the end, they became so obsessed with expanding the Walking Dead universe that I think we lost a bit of that. Like, say what you will about season 1, it has its problems for sure, but when it is doing character stuff, it does a pretty good job at that. The arcs are very simple and CW-y, but they're also very clear. Like, you know what Hope's whole thing is, you know what Silas's whole thing is, etc. Season 2 introduced and tried to go deeper into even more characters that a lot of their arcs felt unfocused and confusing, and with how much of an emphasis they put on world building with the cure and the CRM's larger plans, it almost felt like fucking sensory overload. They tried to do way too much in arguably too little time, and none of it came out particularly great. While season 2 is overall much better than season 1, it's because it's more consistent, since it's a lot more homogenous in tone with the other Walking Dead shows at the time. You know, season 1 felt like its own thing, for better or worse, but season 2 felt like the post-Rick seasons of the main show, or a less shitty version of the Fear reboot. Hey, I'll take World Beyond over Fear season 8 any day.
See, I know what that is. I know what it is. I've seen it before. I know it's time for it to be dead. We need to make sure it's not alive.
The ending is a bit open-ended on certain fronts, but it still somehow manages to have the most conclusive ending out of any of the Walking Dead shows so far. The main show intentionally left a lot of things vague for the future spin-offs, while Fear just straight up didn't know what the fuck it was doing. World Beyond feels conclusive as fuck in comparison. You know, the characters all have completed arcs, even if they weren't particularly great. They have new goals, and while they do leave open the possibility of these characters returning for more stories in the future, we can also get away with not seeing them ever again. Scotty Gimpy Tease loves doing that part. He loves introducing characters that he claims are important and then just never seeing them again. Granted, I do think the open-ended elements make the ending feel a little bit rushed, which is extremely ironic considering they knew from the jump that this was only going to be a 2-season show. I mean, you'd think with that level of foresight that they'd plan a more conclusive ending, or at the very least have an idea of if and when these characters would be returning at some point in the Walking Dead universe and then write them accordingly, but they just kind of ignored that, so, you know, it's kind of just ends up being whatever, you know? But that is not all for World Beyond, because we have one final post-credits scene. We follow a lady in some kind of abandoned warehouse as she finds some hard drives and boots up a laptop. These hard drives contain video logs from none other than Dr. Edwin Jenner, who, if you don't recall, was the scientist at the CDC trying to find a cure from all the way back in season 1 of the main show. He was apparently sending these videos to a researcher in France who apparently has done some kind of research on different types of walkers. The woman is then interrupted by some guy speaking French and saying nothing of importance, and he shoots her dead. Within moments, she gets back up as a walker and starts running at the door and beating the fuck out of it with almost inhuman strength. This is our first look at variant walkers. Well, it's the first look if you were watching these as they aired, since they didn't actually show up in the main show until season 11, which came out after World Beyond, but we already covered it, and then nowadays most people just watch the main show first and then this, but you get the fucking idea. Chronologically speaking, the first time we've ever seen a variant walker. Now, I've already expressed my opinions on variants back in the main show video, and my opinion on that really hasn't changed. I think they're kinda lame and generic and take away a bit of the realism that the Walking Dead universe was originally known for. However, I think the way that they revealed them here is pretty cool. The Dr. Jenner cameo is a fun callback, and it's also revealed that the outbreak possibly started in France and is implied that the French scientist trying to cure it ended up making it worse. With the Daryl Dixon spinoff sending Daryl to France a few years later, it seems as though this scene was meant to be clear setup for that. Now my question is, why the fuck is this just tagged onto the end of World Beyond, a show that has nothing to fucking do with any of this? The only connection that you could make here is that the scientists in World Beyond were trying to find a cure, and that's the same thing that Dr. Jenner was doing, and presumably also these French scientists, so there's like a loose connection there. But even then that doesn't make sense because this French lady isn't even CRM as far as I can tell, and if she was meant to be, then she was clearly retconned to be part of La Pavois from the Daryl spinoff, which has nothing to do with the CRM. Pretty sure I said that right. I don't speak French because I'm white. I also find it incredibly telling that when the finale aired, this was seemingly the only thing that any news publication wanted to talk about. You know, it's not about where the characters end up, not how their arcs were handled, not about the writing, none of that. It's just like, oh, more expanded universe lore. Can't wait to see where this goes. Like, what a fucking marketing nightmare that your fucking post-credit scene that's meant to tease a different show ended up overshadowing everything else that went on in your finale episode. While this scene is cool and all, it really contributes nothing to the Walking Dead universe, since everything in it was better established in the other shows, and it has zero connection to the show that is arbitrarily attached to. What's up, guys? Norwood3 here, I'm back at it. But that has been World Beyond Season 2, and to reiterate, I don't think it's that bad. It is way better than Season 1 in pretty much every conceivable way, and if you're one of the, 7 people who care about the lore of the Walking Dead universe, you'll probably find something to enjoy here. I also do think that a large part of this was the focus on the adult characters over the child characters, since if you know Walking Dead fans, you'll know that they hate kids. Who had the crazier rivalry, Rick versus Negan, or Walking Dead fans versus any child in the show whatsoever? The ending was just kinda okay, but everything leading up to it was more than competently made. I like how basic competence is the bar that we've reached now. Like the bar used to be way up here with seasons 1 through 5 of the main show, but now it's like this universe has been so fucking watered down. The bar is like over here now, which is like baseline competence. Whatever, I don't know, fucking kill me with a gun. But that's season 2. Let's end this bitch. Oh shit, you guys watching that? The fuck you watching? What? We're not doing an intermission. What the fuck? What do you want? They weren't supposed to cut back to the green screen. I don't know why they did that. There wasn't supposed to be an intermission here. Here's the end of the video. Why aren't you cutting to the end of the video? Dude, cut to the end of the video. Cut to the end of the video. Editor, put a meme right here to break up your thoughts, because I'm dumb and gay. So, that has been The Walking Dead World Beyond. And honestly, wasn't the worst thing I've ever seen. A lot of people online seem to vehemently hate it. And in some cases, rightfully so, because there are most certainly a lot of problems. But I do think that it's ultimately a matter of perspective. If this show was its own thing, and it wasn't attached to The Walking Dead at all, would people still hate it? At least to this degree. Like, if this actually was just a straight up CW show, do you still think it would get this level of hatred?
Why am I still getting hate?
Like, I honestly think that part of the reason that it gets so much hate is because it's part of the Walking Dead universe, and the Walking Dead set a pretty high standard. The only thing that ever came close to that standard was Fear's Classic era, which continued a precedent that this is the vibe that Walking Dead shows should have. World Beyond being aimed at a younger audience and all that doesn't make it a bad show. It makes it a bad Walking Dead show. This is just not the kind of thing that we'd grown to expect from this universe. Hell, Walking Dead fans by and large seem to actually hate kids. So doing an entire show about them was just about as far as you could possibly get from the core fanbase. World Beyond is a bad Walking Dead show, but looking past that, it's pretty decent, all things considered. You know, while the teenage POV might dissuade you, the characters are all pretty interesting, at least the specific ones that they honed in on. The story is entirely competent, it has some interesting thematic elements, and the mystery and lore added in Season 2 can be really compelling. There is a lot to like here, so I think to call it complete trash is kind of insane. However, it's also got some serious problems that are very hard to ignore. The pacing is horrendous with how much they repeat themselves, the mystery elements are only sometimes effective, and for every character that had an interesting and compelling character arc, there's another character whose arc is confusing and unclear. And like I said earlier, Season 2 is actually pretty good, but to get to it you gotta sit through Season 1, which you will either mildly enjoy or completely hate, and there is no in between. I do not think there's a single person on this planet who's really going to bat for World Beyond Season 1, like, oh yeah, this is actually really great. Not a single person thinks that. It honestly really depends on what you're looking for in a Walking Dead show. Like, if you're cool with CW tier character drama and the teenage angle, then yeah, you'll probably enjoy this. But if you're looking for that, you know, Walking Dead Season 1 Frank Darabont vibe, you are certainly not going to find that here. Hashtag free Frank Darabont. He's not in prison, but we should never put him there. I think the worst part of World Beyond is honestly how little it ends up mattering in terms of the larger scope of the Walking Dead universe. This was our first proper look at the CRM ever since they were first shown off in Fear, and I don't think anything new was introduced in these 20 episodes that had any lingering effect on anything else that came afterward. You know, like, okay, yeah, Iris and Elton make it to Portland and warn them about what the CRM did, and this is never mentioned ever again. Even in The Ones Who Live, where it should be brought up, they seem to actively ignore it. Silas is stated to be Jadis' student, yet he never shows up ever again, even when Jadis makes recurring appearances in the other shows. The whole second season is centered around scientists trying to find a cure, and I guess they never made any progress on that since later spin-offs take place years after this, and guess what? There are still walkers.
Walkers.
It really does beg the question of what this show truly adds to the Walking Dead universe to justify its own existence. Because I'll be damned if I spend 20 episodes getting attached to these characters, flaws and all, and have them involved in potentially world-changing events just for them to be forgotten about. And you know, honestly, I hope that we can see the Endlings again someday. You know, maybe whatever Scott Gimple is cooking up for the big Walking Dead universe finale or whatever can also involve Hope, Iris, Elton, and Silas somehow, because if they're gonna bring all the shows together, then I think they deserve to be included as well. Well, let's be honest, we're only really still watching this universe for the Rick and Daryl reunion at this point, but I'll save that for when we get to Towel, which is what I call The Ones Who Live. I call it Towel. The Walking Dead World Beyond is a strange piece of Walking Dead history. It was a show for a younger audience being marketed towards a completely different audience who just wanted context on their favorite sheriff. It was a more lighthearted take on the Walking Dead universe, which is primarily known for being hopeless and dreary. It was a show that aired on the same network as Breaking Bad and Mad Men, but was written by literal CW writers. The show existed in a very weird context, and as a result, is kind of a weird show. But its weirdness is what kind of made it endearing to me. It was by no means the best show around, but I appreciate the fact that it took risks and tried to be different from everything else surrounding it, even if that was very clearly to its detriment. Like, sure, nobody was asking for a CW teen Walking Dead show, but I will defend its right to exist, because with a franchise where everybody complains that it's been stagnant for years, I think it's a little bit ironic that people complained even more when they tried something new. The Walking Dead World Beyond is not a good show, but it's also not a horrible show. So, like, let's stop pretending that it's the worst thing we've ever fucking seen. Now, maybe I just have very low standards, or I have a higher tolerance for shitty TV, or maybe I'm just a pushover asshole who cannot bring himself to end a video on a negative note. But as much as I've complained and criticized this show, I really cannot bring myself to fully hate it. Like, I will probably never watch it again, but I also didn't hate it. But that has been The Walking Dead World Beyond. And let me know in the comments below, what did you think of the show? Were you one of those people that hated it on the premise alone, or did you actually give it a chance and find something to like? Let's discuss. Let's get a little bit gaming. Let's perhaps even get gay. Let's perhaps suck a man's penis gay style. Next time on the Walking Dead Retrospective series, we will finally take on a show that I've been referencing throughout this video and has been on my agenda ever since the first video blew up. The Walking Dead, The Ones Who Live. Sub to the channel if you don't want to miss that. Hit the page if you want to support the channel. I've been MattCMG, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.
You really think the world's gonna end?
You know it is. It's not even about the empties. It's about the people.
They think they need me to save the world, but you are gonna save the world from them. We will.
We're monuments to the past. But everyone here, all of you are the future. We are the future.
Because we can do the impossible. We're gonna make our lives count. Not because we're the last generation, because we're the beginning.
I'm talking the greater good. Doesn't always have to be about right or wrong. It's about doing what's best for everybody, even when you know it's gonna hurt. You all want to get to the Sea Arts research place? Help your dad? Every choice has to be about making it there. Sometimes what's painful in the moment is what gets you where you need to go.
But the bad things we do must be done. We carry that burden so that others don't have to, so there can still be good in the world.
Some nights it's so damn dark. And then they still manage to get dark. But the light will come.
You don't want to hear it, but there are good people here. The scientists, students like us. I'm helping them with something that could be important. A breakthrough, maybe. I'm not saying that changes what the CRM did or what Lila's done, but they are not them.
You on the inside that tell you everything you do is in service to the greater good, that what you do today can help create the next 500 years. You go in not knowing exactly who you are, you lose perspective. You lose yourself.
Because really, we don't get to know. There's no perfect modeling, no way to predict if today is the last day, if the world lasts a year or two, or forever. Maybe all we get to know is now. It's really about those little pieces of now that get us there. Those small steps that move us forward, keep us growing and evolving. Because all of those moments put together, that's a life. And that's everything.
Let's get some pussy tonight.